Good morning and happy Wednesday. I do have one announcement regarding CalRecycle's electronic annual report, which we affectionately refer to as the EAR or EAR. And in terms of key dates, that reporting platform was opened as of yesterday, June 15th, online. The report is due on August 3rd. And we are holding an ear training webinar or a related training webinar on Wednesday, the 24th, and that will be from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. Taking us back to our regularly scheduled programming, it is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce CalRecycle's Director, Zoe Heller, a champion of California's zero waste and circular economy efforts. Director Heller leads system-wide reforms that advance the state's climate and environmental goals, including expanding organics recycling and food recovery to cut landfill pollution, and reducing plastic and packaging waste by strengthening industry responsibility and promoting reuse. Thank you, Zoe, for kicking off this important engagement to highlight areas of alignment in implementing two cornerstone environmental laws, SB 1383 and SB 54.
Thank you, Marcelle, and good morning, everyone. It's pretty great to see all the intros happening in the chat. This webinar has incredible participation, and we're really looking forward to the conversation today. So you may ask how this came about. Many of you have participated in our 1383 chats before, but what we've heard is a number of questions coming in about how 1383 and SB 54 complement each other and intersect. You all have such a critical role in the work that we do here in California and in collection that we want to make sure that you have the clarity that you need so you can all continue to do the great work that you do with confidence. For example, we've heard confusion around the differences between 1383 bin labeling requirements and the covered material category list under SB 54. We've also heard concerns from jurisdictions that they might be fined for not collecting every covered material and that you want clarity on what those requirements mean. So we're here today to provide that and really start the conversation with you all. We've developed a cross-program team here at CalRecycle to explore these issues. And this team is also coordinating very closely with Circular Action Alliance, the producer responsibility organization for SB 54. And we're thrilled that they're here presenting alongside us today. A key part of this work is developing practical tools like today's webinar to help jurisdictions feel confident in their implementation approaches. And there's significant opportunity to support 1383's organic waste reduction goals by addressing single-use fiber and wood packaging under SB 54. What jurisdictions are already doing for SB 1383 complements and advances the goals of SB 54. And at the same time, SB 54 will help jurisdictions by driving increased recovery of single-use packaging, especially fiber and wood, which continue to make up a large share of what's ending up in landfills. CalRecycle's focus is compliance assistance first. I know you've heard this on 1383, and the same goes for 54, especially when it comes to collection requirements. Implementation will be a dial, not a switch, and we recognize that this will take time. So I want to be very clear. CalRecycle does not intend to enforce on jurisdictions out of the gate. Once again, it's that focus on providing you all with the tools that you need and providing that compliance assistance. Our priority is supporting jurisdictions as they build programs aligned with the responsible end markets. So thank you all for all that you do, and I'll turn it over to the team to begin the webinar.
Thank you, Zoe. Before we continue, let's review a few logistical items about the Q&A process. For this webinar, we'll be using the Q&A function. If you have a question, please type it into the Q&A pane. While the chat function is available for sharing resources with other participants, we will not be monitoring the chat for questions. Please make sure to use the Q&A pane for that. If you do not see the Q&A pane, ensure you have the latest version of Zoom installed. For the purpose of this webinar, we will only be responding to questions related to the materials presented by each panelist. Our team will be monitoring and reviewing questions submitted via the Q&A pane throughout the webinar. We will have various Q&A sessions throughout today's chat. After your question is addressed during the live Q&A, you may unmute yourself and ask a follow-up question if needed, or simply thank the panelists who addressed your question. If doing so, please state your name and affiliation. If you're unable to unmute yourself or access a Q&A pane, feel free to email your question to slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov using the subject line SB 1383 Chat with CalRecycle. If we do not get your question during the session, a land representative will follow up with you after the webinar. Next slide, please. For today's agenda, we have 5 presentations led by an excellent panelist who will be covering the intersection of SB 54 and SB 1383, SB 54 reimbursement, jurisdiction enforcement, how jurisdictions can assess the SB 54 covered material categories with their collection programs, and the SB 54 exemption process. CalRecycle will present in coordination with the Circular Action Alliance and Zero Waste Sonoma. All presenters will be available to answer related questions. Next slide, please. Now that we walked through today's agenda, I'd like to introduce our first presenters who will discuss the SB 54 and SB 1383 intersect. We have CalRecycle's Division of Circular Economy Deputy Director, Michelle Martin, who oversees the industry-run stewardship programs and circular economy investments to build California's waste-free future. Her team is currently leading the implementation of California's newest extended producer responsibility program for single-use packaging and single-use plastic foodware, loose batteries and textiles, as well as new dealer cooperative systems that retailers can join to redeem empty beverage containers. Deputy Director Martin's career spans more than 20 years at CalRecycle in various roles to innovative department financial assistance programs, including as Chief of the Financial Resources Management Branch. Her leadership continues to make a significant impact on environmental protection for our state, including steering our ship towards a more circular and sustainable future. We also have CalRecycle's Division of Materials Management and Local Assistance Deputy Director, Kara Morgan, who oversees recycling, composting, and waste reduction programs across many materials and jurisdictions to move California towards a circular economy. Her team supports cities, counties, state agencies, and school districts with resources to help them implement their requirements, including food and yard waste recycling and unsold food recovery. Staff also supports circular solutions to reduce waste and grow markets for materials that have historically been landfilled, including electronic waste and tires. Deputy Director Morgan previously served as Chief of CalRecycle's Local Assistance and Market Development Branch, helping lead the adoption of regulations for states' organic laws, Senate Bill 1383, and directing compliance assistance for over 600 jurisdictions and 200 state agencies. Her leadership and experience are instrumental to California's success in implementing and building a truly circular economy for all materials.
Thank you so much, Addie, for that warm welcome. And thank you all for joining us today. Michelle and I and the whole team are excited to talk about the work that is happening to rethink how California manages what we make, use, and throw away. Next slide. First, I'd like to start off with talking about SB 1383. California's organics recycling and food recovery law is built to reduce landfill methane emissions. And nearly half of what we still throw away in our landfills is organic waste. And a significant amount of that organic material that we are still disposing of is fiber and wood single-use packaging. These are also covered materials under the SB 54 regulations. And when these materials break down in our landfills, it's releasing methane, a super pollutant over 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Since 2022, California has required local programs to provide both recycling and organics collection programs and support of food recovery and educating residents and businesses in California. And we are seeing results. Jurisdictions reported for 2024 that 97% of those required jurisdictions are now offering organics recycling and blue container recycling collection to residents. We're providing a convenient way to recycle our organic materials. And 75% of our commercial businesses now have collection services. And we're happy to report that we have recovered over 1 billion unsold meals that have been rescued up through 2024. Next slide.
Good morning, everyone. California's Packaging Producer Responsibility Law establishes a new extended producer responsibility program for single-use packaging and plastic food serviceware. Packaging makes up more than half of what California landfills by volume. Producer responsibility shifts accountability upstream to the producers who design and profit from these materials. By 2032, producers must achieve a 25% reduction in single-use plastic packaging, a 65% recycling rate for covered materials, and 100% of packaging must be recyclable or compostable. The packaging producer responsibility regulations have been approved, and CalRecycle is committed to successful implementation. Today, we want to focus on how these two landmark laws intersect and what it means for local jurisdictions. Next slide.
Maximizing the success and benefits of both of these laws depends on all of you. Jurisdictions are really where policy becomes reality. You are the bridge between state law and what actually happens in our communities every day. You're already doing the hard work to keep organic waste that includes fiber and wood packaging out of our landfills. You're providing that convenient collection service to Californians at where they work, play, and live. And you're conducting outreach and education, and you're monitoring contamination and educating Californians on putting recyclables and organic materials in the right container. The programs that you are implementing for SB 1383 complement and intersect with SB 54, where jurisdictions will be collecting covered materials, including single-use packaging and food serviceware. Jurisdictions across the state are already implementing collection programs for these materials, but there's more to be done. And reviewing collection programs and making any needed adjustments to align with the new framework is something we'll be talking about later in the webinar. And you all will be partnering with the Producer Responsibility Organization, Circular Action Alliance, on public education to help reduce contamination and get materials in the right containers. What you're doing to implement SB 1383 complements and supports what SB 54 is trying to achieve. Also, SB 54 can help support the work you are already doing by increasing the recovery of packaging materials. And these are things that are being collected in your programs, but there's so much more that we can do. Laws only work when they're supported by strong local programs, and jurisdictions and their service providers lead that work every day. And CalRecycle, we do not take that for granted. Next slide. So jurisdictions have been asking us how packaging, the new EPR SB 54 law, and the SB 1383 regulations complement each other, and where do they intersect? CalRecycle's response and guidance is shaped by three frequently conveyed themes, and Zoe hit on these in her opening remarks. There's confusion by jurisdictions around organics recycling, the bin labeling requirements, and timing of collection of items for the covered material categories list, and how and when they align. Another question commonly brought up is understanding how enforcement with jurisdictions will be conducted for both the organics program under 1383 and collection requirements under SB 54. And there's been a lot of uncertainty about how the exemption processes for these two laws relate to each other, particularly for rural and low population jurisdictions. Jurisdictions raising these questions early and now are doing the right thing. Next slide.
CalRecycle does not yet have complete answers to every jurisdiction questions about where these two laws intersect. The department has a clear plan for building that guidance, and we're already moving on it. We're building this guidance with the same approach that worked for the organics recycling implementation. Compliance assistance first, clear, consistent communication, and partnerships with our partners doing this work. Next slide. CalRecycle organized quickly to address jurisdictions' concerns. We met with key partners, including Timothy Burrows and Doug Cobal, who are members of the SB 54 Advisory Board, to understand those critical gaps and needs of jurisdictions. And we've built a cross-divisional team specifically focused on the intersection of the two laws. The team includes members from our product stewardship compliance, jurisdiction compliance, local assistance, and the packaging EPR team. And the team is actively mapping where these two regulations overlap, identifying points where we can build complementary approaches to reduce the burden and confusion for jurisdictions, and developing tools and outreach needed to address them. We're also coordinating directly with Circular Action Alliance to ensure the producer-funded resources and jurisdiction guidance are aligned. Next slide.
So here's what this work looks like in practice. We're compiling jurisdiction questions and developing plain language answers to help reduce the confusion. These will be posted on both the CalRecycle and Circular Action Alliance websites, so they're easy to find. And like today's webinar, we've developed this session with dedicated time to discuss these intersections and answer your questions. We plan to hold more webinars and chats to share implementation and best practices that are happening around the state. And these sessions will include Circular Action Alliance, industry, jurisdictions. We're going to take that same collaborative format as our monthly 1383 webinar chats. A few of the first topics requested by jurisdictions include the compliance evaluation, enforcement process, and the exception processes for both of these regulations and how they'll be designed. And that's why we're here today, and we're going to share information about those two things. We also are going to create a visual tool with Circular Action Alliance to show where regulated organic materials and our packaging covered material categories list overlaps. Think of a Venn diagram where materials that are common to both frameworks, like fiber and wood packaging, intersect in the middle of that diagram. And this will live on our website as a quick reference for jurisdictions. We also look forward to collaborating with CAA on developing and disseminating model educational materials, including bin labels. The organics recycling rules require jurisdictions to update bin labels when a container is replaced or is new. Jurisdictions will have 1 year after any covered material category list is updated to begin collecting the newly listed materials, unless they have an exemption. We will create guidance on how the tool rules can be implemented with a focus on reducing the burden on jurisdictions, but providing the needed education to Californians. We will be coordinating with Circular Action Alliance and the advisory board on labeling design. We know that it's important for Californians to have effective labels. It's a key aspect of getting things in the right container. And this effort with CAA and the advisory board will include guidance on existing organics education. We'll modify that and adjust so that we can all be providing the best information to Californians. Again, we're focused on leveraging what jurisdictions are already doing with 1383 education and further enhancing these efforts with these additional resources from CAA and CalRecycle. And just like today, and as we've been out across the state, we're committed to showing up where jurisdictions gather and having this conversation to provide answers and guidance to help us all be successful. Next slide.
And continuing on describing those tools, we're also exploring changes to the electronic annual report to allow voluntary reporting on covered material categories already listed as materials they collect. This will help CalRecycle track system-wide progress and give the enforcement team better visibility. We're also collaborating with CAA to provide them publicly available data from the electronic annual report so they can use the data that already exists and only ask jurisdictions for data that's not already being provided to CalRecycle. As stated before, we're actively working on providing compliance assistance through building tools and guidance and continuing to meet with stakeholders. You're going to hear today on the work that our two enforcement teams have been doing to collaborate on how we can use the existing 1383 compliance evaluation process to support jurisdiction 54 enforcement process. We're developing a complementary process that covers compliance evaluations, notices, corrective action plans, and defines a path to resolution. Today, Emily Coven from CAA will share ideas related to reimbursement. There's an intersection with 54 and 1383 for jurisdictions who are already implementing collection for residents and businesses for recyclables and organics. Any expansion in scope or frequency, such as increasing recovery of materials by the 54 regulations, expanding technical assistance, building reuse systems, would be considered new and additional work. And we anticipate 54 funding mechanisms that could help support incremental efforts to also further expand the collection programs that have been implemented by 1383. And Emily will speak to more on that shortly. We will be enhancing our 1383 collection requirements and 54 webpage to address how collection requirements complement and align with each other. And contamination monitoring is another area where CalRecycle and CA are currently thinking is centered on building alignment between 54 and 1383 by leveraging existing contamination monitoring, route reviews, and waste evaluation practices wherever possible. And 54 introduces new covered material categories that are not fully captured today. And we will also focus on recovering more materials that are being lost to landfill. And we really see an opportunity to thoughtfully adapt existing 1383 approaches to gather additional data rather than starting from scratch. Many of the specifics, such as methodology adjustments, frequency, and implementation pathways, are still being informed by ongoing system data work. And this is an area where continued coordination with CAA jurisdictions and service providers are important. This includes using existing 1383 route reviews and waste evaluations as a baseline, with target modifications to capture 54 covered material categories not fully tracked, expanding data collection in a way that explicitly treated as a new and additional work rather than layering unfunded requirements onto existing 1383 programs. Exploring opportunities to align or standardize methodologies over time so data is collected under 1383 can better inform 54 planning and compliance needs. Being thoughtful about monitoring frequency and scope to balance data quality with operational feasibility for jurisdictions, haulers, and processors. And continuing coordination between CA and CalRecycle as 54 requirements are refined, informed by ongoing system-level data and implementation experience. So today, we will share the exemption process guidance. Circular Action Alliance is a key partner since they review exemptions first. We will address rural and low population jurisdictions, including situations where a jurisdiction is exempt under organics recycling requirements, but must still provide recycling collection, as the packaging EPR does not offer a blanket exemption. We want to create consistency and efficiency for jurisdictions where possible. And finally, we will coordinate directly with CA's education and outreach coordinator to ensure producer-funded packaging EPR education aligns rather than conflicts with our statewide 1383 organics outreach. Research shows that too many messages create confusion, so we're working together to provide simpler, consistent messaging across both regulations. This includes ensuring that businesses understand how their current work, like ensuring proper containers, staff training, and contamination monitoring, builds on what businesses already know from 1383 regulations. We're also exploring ways CAA, statewide education campaign, can help jurisdiction meet some of their existing 1383 education requirements, creating efficiencies rather than adding work. Key for all of these efforts is changing the way Californians think and act on organics and packaging recycling. Next slide.
So we are here today, not just to share updates, but to continue the conversation and hear your input. The tools we mentioned are just a starting point, not a finished product. We want to know, what have we missed? What is most urgent for your jurisdiction right now? What format works best for your team? Your perspective will help us build guidance that reflects the reality on the ground. We are collectively working toward a future where organic waste is recycled to fuel our economy and feed our soil, not landfills. Packaging is designed to be recovered and not discarded. And the circular systems we build are clear, consistent, and workable for jurisdictions and Californians. You have always been the ones making that vision real. CalRecycle is here to make your work easier. We appreciate your time today, and we look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Karen and Michelle, for your insightful presentation. Next, we have Emily Coben, the California Executive Director of Circular Action Alliance. Emily Coben is an entrepreneur and an innovator whose career has spanned both the tech and recycling industries. In her role as California Executive Director at Circular Action Alliance, Emily oversees all aspects of the SB 54 program, including collaborating with local jurisdictions and service providers to enhance recycling programs, developing end markets, building statewide capacity for reuse and refill, and facilitating packaging design changes and regulatory compliance for producers. Prior to joining CAA, Emily was a founder and CEO of Recyclist, a mission-driven software company that supported local jurisdictions and haulers across California with data management and outreach solutions for municipal recycling and organics programs.
Great. Thank you. Am I on? Oh, there we go. There's my slides. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today. And a special thank you to the CalRecycle team for inviting Circular Action Alliance to be here today. As you'll hear, we're really keen to start reaching out more to jurisdictions. And so this couldn't have been a more well-timed event, and really appreciate you all showing up. So next slide. Legal disclaimer, I'm not your lawyer, CAA is not your lawyer, SB 54 is complicated, and we are not providing you with legal advice, but we will try to tell you as much as we can otherwise. Okay, next slide, please. Those of you who've been following SB 54 may have seen this before, so I will keep it quick. But for those of you who are new to SB 54 and to Circular Action Alliance, we are the Producer Responsibility Organization, which means we are a nonprofit. We're based here in the US, and we are the Producer Responsibility Organization that has been selected by every state so far that has selected a pro for packaging EPR laws. So we're in 6 states right now. California, we have 2 programs live. California will be the 3rd when it goes live in January. We sit at the center of a lot of different interest holders. We consult with everybody, which we're doing now. We develop a plan, which I'll talk about more in a minute. Once that plan is approved, we facilitate compliance, reporting. We set fees for producers. Those fees are intended to incentivize packaging design changes upstream. And then we also spend the money from the fees downstream to invest in recycling systems, as well as upstream in reuse and refill systems. We also use those fees to do public education and outreach. Okay, that's super high level. That's like the 20-second version. That's an hour in and of itself. But next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the requirements. Next slide. Kara and Michelle went over these, so I'm going to focus on just a few things here. One is this source reduction, reducing the amount of single-use plastic packaging and food serviceware by 25%. That's a really big deal. That's something that we're really focused on as a producer responsibility organization because we do represent all the producers. And a key element of that is that 10% reduction comes from converting packaging to either reuse, refill, or eliminating it altogether. The rest of it can come from various ways. And then the other thing I think that they didn't mention is that sort of industry-wide, we are aiming to hit a 65% recycling rate for single-use plastic packaging in California. And I'm sure all of you who are on this webinar and of this industry know that that is a very, very ambitious goal and therefore is going to take a lot of work. And this is really where you all come in. We need everybody to work together in order to hit these goals. Next slide. So all that was on the producers. The good news is for jurisdictions and service providers, there's really just this one requirement, which is including the covered materials designated as recyclable or compostable on the covered material category list that CalRecycle publishes annually, including those in your programs, unless you have an exemption, which folks will be talking about later. Next slide, please. And this is just from statute. I am not going to read this, but this basically lists in statute all of the costs that you may incur implementing the law. And the good news is this is very much not an unfunded mandate. This is a fully funded mandate. So really what all of this is saying is that any costs that you incur in implementing this law are covered by the program. So there's a lot of funding that's going to be flowing through to jurisdictions and service providers, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. Next slide. The other thing sort of that comes from our statute and regulations is our timeline. So just quickly, 2 days ago, we submitted our program plan to the advisory board. I'll talk about that more in a minute. We are currently in a public comment period. I'll also talk about that. We'll submit a final plan to CalRecycle mid-October. CalRecycle, if we stay on this timeline, either approves or conditionally approves the plan by the end of the year, and we are up and running in January. So we're really talking about sort of a 6-month time frame to get everybody understanding what's going on, starting to engage with us, and really being ready to hit the ground running in the new year. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about the funding. The next slide. Okay, so we have set up a reimbursements process in our program plan that we just published. There's an extensive chapter about this. There's also some kind of summary information on our website, so you can read the Cliff Notes version, you can read the full novel, or you can listen to me tell you about it right now, which is the super short version. Effectively, the reimbursements process is set up to fund the new and additional costs required to implement SB 54. So some packaging EPR program, some EPR programs in general, right, cover the entire cost of managing a material. The way that SB 54 was written was acknowledging that California has this robust, mature recycling system, but in order to reach these targets that we're moving towards, there will be a lot of new and additional costs associated. So those are the costs that we, as the pro, will be funding you all for. So, and to be clear, the law takes those costs back to January 1st of 2023. So anything that you have done between January 1st, 2023 and now and forward into the future are all eligible as covered costs, if they pass our eligibility criteria, of course. This is primarily local jurisdictions, service providers. There are some others that may qualify as well. That's in our program plan. And the way that broad strokes, the way it's going to work, we'll have an online portal. You'll log in, you'll register, you'll submit your application, we'll verify your application, then we sign a contract and issue payment. We will have a team that will be supporting local jurisdictions and service providers through this process. We've started to hire them. We are hiring many more people right now. So we're not going to leave you on your own out there to figure it all out on your own. We're really going to have a team that can answer your questions, support you through the application process, make sure you're clear, and make sure that you're successful and making best use of your time and of the funding to implement SB 54. Next slide, please. Very high level in terms of our sort of, I'll keep going. Recording's back. Okay. In terms of our guiding principles on the reimbursement process, it's really important to us that we balance the local government needs as well as the statewide needs. So we're not just going to come in and say, we're doing this across the state. It's really important to us that what we do fits your programs locally. We want to support existing services and infrastructure. We're not coming in here to reinvent the wheel, but more to enhance the wheel that already exists exists and is rolling quite well. It's critical to us that we drive efficiency and effectiveness. We have a lot of funding, but we need that funding to all return actual results of moving towards the 54 targets. We will not be duplicating or cross-subsidizing, so there has been questions and concerns expressed about double dipping or CAA funding, things that are also being paid for by ratepayers. We will have a process in place to ensure that that does not happen. We're committed to accuracy, to transparency. We also are committed to data privacy, so we will be as transparent as we can while, of course, respecting the privacy of the data of those that are working with us. And of course, everything we do has to be consistent with SB 54 objectives. That will keep us plenty busy throughout the coming years. Next slide, please. I'm going to get into some of what the funding looks like and then my next few slides. But before I go there, we got to talk about end markets, because when we talk about collecting materials and especially adding new materials to your programs, I would imagine many people will say, well, the reason we don't have those in our programs is we don't have end markets for them. So I want to convey to you all that end market development is CAA's #1 priority. We are very, very, very focused on this. We are not in the business of asking anybody to collect a material that does not have an end market. That makes no sense. So right now, what we are doing is we're working on identifying end markets. We're talking to all the end markets, doing sort of a preliminary look at whether they'll be able to get verified as responsible end markets. And then most importantly, developing end market, so there is somewhere for this material to flow. So as we go through these slides, just know that that is part of the process. It's not on you as a local jurisdiction or a service provider to find an end market. It is on CAA to develop those end markets and make sure that they exist, so that when you collect materials and process them through MRFs, there is somewhere for those bales to go. Okay, so I'm going to just walk through a handful of examples of our sort of categories of the type of funding that we will be providing to local jurisdictions and service providers. So next slide, please. There we go. Facilities. So this is a really, really big one for us. We anticipate making very significant investments in MRFs, both in equipment as well. So we're doing as well as the labor and everything associated with operating the equipment. So this is both OpEx and CapEx, right? So if we were to get, if you were to purchase a new optical sorter and that was funded by CAA, that would also come along with the labor required to run that machine, with the maintenance required, all of the associated costs. It's not just to hand you some equipment and leave you on your own to deal with the costs associated with it. So we're really looking at new equipment, new systems, facility expansion, if that's an option. There's just, so many different ways that we can fund improvements at MRFs that will allow you to accept new materials or better sort materials, improve the quality of your bales, really anything. Again, remembering our goal is to hit those very high recycling rates. So anything that will help us to hit those higher rates is what we are focused on. Next slide, please. Transportation. So in a lot of cases, there are materials that are not making their way to MRFs and then on to responsible end markets because the cost of transportation is prohibitive. So again, this is where SB 54 funding can step in. And once again, CapEx and OpEx, if new vehicles are required, it can cover those, but also the driver, the maintenance, the fuel. We're really committed to getting materials to end markets, and this is a really key component of it. Next slide, please. Collection and service expansion. So, from Kara and Michelle's slide earlier, and I think we all know it, we have really good collection here in California. So it's not a huge piece of the puzzle, but there are areas that do not have collection, maybe based on an exemption or a waiver. Even if not required, we may be able to provide the funding to make that happen. That could happen curbside, but that also could happen drop off, right? We're not committed to a singular model of collection. At the end of the day, really what this is about for us is capturing all those materials that are not currently flowing through to end markets. So if they're not getting collected in the first place, we want to collect them. If they are getting collected, but then finding their way to landfill, we want to get them finding their way instead to end markets. And I think I got one more here. One more slide. Yes, education and outreach is a huge part of SB 54. We will definitely be funding this. This is probably the most relevant to a lot of the local jurisdiction folks here. If you're, we would love to increase participation. We would love to decrease contamination. Whatever that looks like in your community, we're excited to talk to you about that. We also will be developing materials for statewide campaigns and resources you can use, and supporting commercial and multifamily technical assistance, really big part of it. Final thing, administration. It's going to take your time to deal with SB 54. It's going to take you time to deal with us at CAA. Those costs are covered under SB 54. So whatever time you are spending, this is something you could kind of start tracking today. What time are you spending on the SB 54 reimbursement process? That can be recovered through the reimbursement process. It's a little meta, but it's true. Okay, next slide. I do want to address a couple frequently asked about materials. So I think if you look at the cover material category list, if you have not already, most of those materials designated recyclable or compostable, you may already have in your program. So you may not find there's a stupendous change. A lot of the work you may be doing is more about increasing the recovery rates of those materials, but there are some that come up a lot. PET thermoforms, some people are not collecting because of the, there's costs, that there's sort of knock-on downstream effects of the costs. Oh, my slides are gone. But anyways, there's knock-on downstream effects of the costs of those. That's the kind of funding that CAA can provide to cover. There's also compostable plastics are on the list. We know that there is a shortage of end markets, or, organics processors that are keen to collect those. We totally understand that. There's no universe in which we're going to tell you have to collect something that has no end market. At the same time, we will be working on developing end markets. If they exist, we will encourage those to flow through to end markets that accept them. Those two materials on the right are not on the list of considered recyclable or compostable, but those are two of the materials that CAA is looking to what we call on-ramp. And there's a lot more information about this in our program plan. But these are materials where, even though you're not required to, we will be providing funding to those jurisdictions and service providers who are willing and able to add those to their programs, process them. Cartons, I think that one's kind of on the fence right now in terms of it could get recyclable pretty easily soon. Film and flex, that's the big challenge. We're looking at different models of that for collection and for processing. So whether that's commingled, whether that's a separate collection, whether that's drop-off, we are still exploring, trying different things, and very open to what's the way that we can collect that in a way that it does not interfere with your programs and it actually gets it into a clean and recycled state. So let's see, next slide. What do I have? I have to talk for 1 minute about reuse and refill because it is a huge part of our program. Next slide. It's not a big part of this reimbursements process, but it's a big part of our funding and a big part of what we're doing. We are going to be trying to do an enormous amount of reuse and refill across the state of California. I put a photo here of kids in a cafeteria because one of the main ways that we are looking at is working with schools to convert cafeterias from single-use food serviceware, plastic food serviceware, over to reusable food serviceware. So if your jurisdiction is interested in that, please get in touch with us. And then there are all sorts of other things we're looking into, like B2B transport packaging, which is like reusable pallet wrap, and then all these other things that I don't have time to talk about because we're running short on time. But just know that this is a big part of what's happening too. Okay, I'm on the home straight here. Next slide, please. We have a survey coming up. It's actually out there right now, and we would love for you to participate. So this is the part where I ask for your help. Next slide, please. We actually have a survey that has gone out to MRFs, organics processors, and end markets a while ago. We're trying to talk to all of them and understand their current capacity and future potential. Local jurisdictions, a survey went out starting on Monday, and I believe it's wrapping up being sent out today. And we're going to ask you a bunch of questions. They're listed here, but effectively what we're really trying to get to is understanding what's happening in your current program and where's there potential for future improvement or expansion that we can fund. Next slide. Why are we doing this? You may say, oh, can you go back one? Why are we doing this? You may say, we did a survey last year as part of the needs assessment. Why are you asking me this again? Unfortunately, we at CAA we can read the needs assessment like anyone can, but we do not have access to the individual responses or the disaggregated data. And when we're looking at really modeling costs and like making our implementation and operational plan, we really need to know where these things are coming from. So we do have to kind of come back and ask. It is not the same survey as you may have received last summer, but it is a survey that asks a lot of questions. At the end of the day, I think what's important for everybody here to know is that unlike, say, the city county payment program, where there's a sort of fixed amount based on, the 5 cents or the 10 cents, like that is a fixed dollar amount of money for the program. With this packaging EPR program, CAA's responsibility is to set the budget so that we collect enough fees to cover the cost that it's going to take to stand up this program. So that's why it's really important that we hear from you. If we don't know what your costs are going to be, we cannot ensure that we set our budget and our fees so that we have enough money to pay your costs. So this is really sort of about helping us help you to make sure we get you the money that you need. So that's why we really, really need to hear from you. And so we can make our plans accordingly. Once we know what you have going on, what you need, we can model the cost if you don't know it. But that's really, really important to us. Next slide. How do you do this? It's an online survey. You should have, if you're a local jurisdiction, you should have gotten a link from us. If you didn't, please email us. We can put this email address in the chat. It's designed so you can collaborate. It's a long survey. I'm not going to lie. It's not going to take you 5 minutes. However, if you can only answer one question, that is better than 0. Please if you can do 2 questions, that's even better. We have bolded the questions that are most important to us. So if you want to do a partial survey, great. Please do a partial survey and answer the bold questions. We also have a link in the survey where you can book office hours to come talk to us. You can ask us your questions about the survey. You can answer the questions of the survey. You can ask us other questions. We are ready to start meeting with jurisdictions, engaging with you, and answering questions. Next slide. I think I got to wrap this up pretty quickly here, so I'm going to start talking fast. When the other surveys, MRFs, organics, and markets, those are due in about 9 days. Local jurisdictions, those are open until July 10th. So yeah, it's about 4 weeks. Please, if you can, participate and get back to us by July 10th. Next slide. What do I got here? Public consultations. I'm going to run through this in 60 seconds. We have a lot of public consultations going on and coming up. Next slide. The 2 that are open right now, one is the program plan. So like I mentioned, we just published this. This could be its own webinar. In fact, it will be its own webinar, but you're going to get the 20-second version. We published it. There's a 60-day comment period. It's open now through August 14th. Please, please, please participate. I can't even tell you how important it is to us that we hear from people. If we know what you think of our program plan and where you see it's working and where you see it's not working, it is going to be so much better than if we don't hear from you. So please do participate in that. And the other one we have open, next slide, please, is the responsible end market standard. That's a standard that will be used to determine whether or not an end market qualifies as responsible. That's being developed by a third party, but with CAA. And that the first draft of that standard is out right now, available through July 9th. July 7th. We can put links to all of these in the chat. Please participate in that as well. And I think the very final thing I have here is we do have, next slide, a couple more consultations coming up. We'll keep you all posted on the applications you'll be filling out to get reimbursement, the service agreement, the project schedules that go with the service agreement. We want to make sure everybody who's going to be participating in the process, these documents work for you. So yeah, I think my final slide, if you just go forward to, is my call to action. We need your voice. I think this is obvious from my presentation, but please take the survey if you can. Partial is fine. Let us know if you didn't get it. Book some office hours to talk to us, and please participate in our public consultation. We really, really want to hear your voice. It's super important. This is a team effort. SB 54, it's a huge team effort, and we really look forward to working with all of you and appreciate you being here today. I think that's it. Sorry I talked so fast at the end. I was trying to get through it.
Thank you, Emily, for your presentation. We will now have our first Q&A session. As a reminder, we'll be using the Q&A function. If you have a question, please type it into the Q&A pane. For the purpose of this webinar, we will only be responding to questions related to the materials presented by each panelist. For questions related to other Circular Action Alliance programs, please reach out to the CAA via the contact page listed on their website and the screen. Now I'll pass the floor to Zach to begin our Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Addie. And we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a lot to get through today. So our first question here is going to be for Kara. And the question is, what if public education materials are outdated, especially things like cart/bin labels that aren't easy to update, and recyclable/compostable material is incorrectly shown as landfill? Should the jurisdiction submit an exemption for the materials?
Okay, thanks, Zach, and I really appreciate this question. So an exemption for this particular circumstance wouldn't make sense if the jurisdiction is collecting the covered material. SB 54 does not place any requirements for public education on the jurisdictions. If a jurisdiction finds, though, education information is confusing or they believe it's outdated, they can be proactive. They can reach out to CAA. CAA will be developing public education outreach materials which jurisdictions can collaborate on. And CalRecycle will be coordinating with CAA and the SB 54 Advisory Board on labeling design to assist jurisdictions in providing effective education. So the SB 1383 organics recycling rules do require jurisdictions to update bin labels, but only when a container is replaced or is new. Jurisdictions will have 1 year after any covered material category for SB 54, where that list is updated, to begin collecting the newly listed materials, unless they have an exemption. We will continue to create guidance and provide clarity on how the two rules can be implemented and support each other, with the focus on reducing the burden on jurisdictions, but really providing that needed education to Californians. So we're all putting things in the right containers. And as Emily said, to get it to that end market. And key for us will be collaborating with CAA in this effort to enhance education outreach efforts to support our local jurisdictions. Our ongoing collaboration with CAA and the advisory board will include guidance, and we'll continue to provide that to jurisdictions. And as we mentioned earlier, we are focused on leveraging what jurisdictions are already doing with 1383 education and further enhancing these efforts with these additional resources. Thanks, Zach.
Thank you so much, Kara. And I see some other videos on from our other panelists. Were you guys interested in chiming in there too? If
Not for
that's
this
okay.
particular question. Thanks, Zach.
All right. Well, Michelle, our next question is directed at you, and that is from Rosine Nguyen with R3 Consulting. Question is, good morning. How can cities prepare for SB 54 ahead of time to ensure seamless implementation?
Yeah, great question. Great questions in the chat. And, just wanted to let folks know that we just published a guidance video that details the statutory and regulatory obligations for local jurisdictions and recycling service providers, along with information on how to file exemptions for collecting certain materials. If you have questions, please email packaging@calrecycle.ca.gov. And we also recommend reaching out to CAA as well. They're expecting to coordinate with local jurisdictions and RSPs. And also just wanted to mention, Emily said this in her presentation, to review CAA's program plan. It's in draft form right now, and they are currently accepting comments until August 14th. Thanks. Back to you, Zach.
Oh, hey, Michelle, I'll add one more plug. Leslie Lukash, very shortly, is also going to be sharing some really great guidance on how jurisdictions can be assessing their collection programs and working to align that with the covered material categories. So stay tuned for that presentation.
Thank you, Kara. Thank you, Michelle. All right, our next question here is going to be for Circular Action Alliance from Alex Soulard. Should jurisdictions be tracking their time spent getting up to speed on SB 54, like attending this meeting for reimbursement? We had another similar question from Jennifer Gilbert. And I believe, Emily, you kind of touched on this question a little bit during your presentation, but if you want to elaborate here, you're welcome to.
Yeah, for sure. So we will be publishing more specific guidance when the application process opens for reimbursements that I think will address the sort of smaller details of the difference between attending a meeting and actually filling out your application and doing the reporting associated with the application. We haven't completed that guidance, so I don't think I could give you an exact, like, this is in, this is out kind of thing. But I think that because that is still forthcoming, what I would recommend is, yeah, track your time, track what you are doing. And then when the guidance come out and the application comes out, then you will have all of your information and you can apply for what does qualify. And like I said, we will be doing a public consultation on our application process. So when you see our applications, it'll actually be really helpful for us if you have some information that you can effectively pressure test our application and say, well, okay, here's your application, but I still can't tell from that what this is. And so that'll really, really help us to get to get ahead of the ambiguity and to get more clear guidance out before the process actually opens.
Perfect. Thank you, Emily. Okay, we have another question for Kara here. This one is from Leah Zhu. Apologies if I mispronounced that last name. How will SB 54 be incorporated into the SB 1383 Administrative Record Enforcement Program? Kara, you're welcome to jump in here.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is suggest we wait until we get into that part of the presentation, and then feel free, if we haven't answered your questions related to that, shoot us another note. Thanks, Zach. Perfect.
That sounds good. Thanks, Kara. Okay, our next question is for CalRecycle. The question is from Carol Mallow. Are any grants coming up for CBO nonprofits to provide education and support to at-risk communities of color and monolingual community members, that is? And anyone from CalRecycle who wants to jump on this one?
Do you want to talk a little bit? I mean, it fits with what you've already covered, but is there anything you want to add to that one?
Yeah, for sure. So what I would encourage would be a couple different things. One is get in touch with us and let's talk about what specifically you have in mind, and we can post a link to another I'm gonna post a bunch of stuff and links in the chat once we're done with this part for ways to access our team. The other thing I would say is we in our program plan there is a chapter on equitable access, participation, and environmental justice that goes into more details on our plans for different communities as well as the different potential funding opportunities. So yes, please do get in touch. Please have a look at that, and let's continue the conversation, because community-based organizations are going to be we hope, if we succeed, will be a big part of the SB 54 implementation. And we are very committed to reaching communities across the state of all types.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, our next question here is for CalRecycle from Lee Mutter. Is there any software that jurisdictions can use to help with implementation of SB 1383 and SB 54? Kara, it looks like you're ready to jump in here. Go ahead.
I don't know if I'm ready to jump. There's a lot that's been developed thus far, like with regards to, and Emily started one of the first ones with Recyclist, collecting information and data. I think, Emily, I'll turn to you. It's probably a little bit early to know what the needs are with respect to data collection tools, but I expect, just like with 1383, we had so much innovation in that space that would be probably a good guess that there will be more developed. Emily, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think a lot of the development in this area happening right now is for the producer community. So one of the ways that I've expressed it to this audience that will understand this is that, in my perspective, SB 54 is the producer's SB 1383. There's a very extensive reporting requirement, very, very detailed reports, which may sound familiar to you from past law. So there's definitely a lot going on in the software space for the producer community. I don't anticipate such a burden on the local jurisdiction and service provider community. So yeah, we'll see what happens, but. Yeah.
Thank you, Emily. And Leslie, I saw you responding in a chat on this one as well. If you'd like to jump in, you're welcome to.
Oh, thank you for that. I was just going to say that we met with our software provider, Smart 1383 for 1383 reporting, and they do now have a 54 reporting feature in their software.
Great, thank you, Leslie. And Marcus?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's just worth adding, I know we'll cover this later on in the webinar, but we will have our packaging EPR system available for local jurisdictions when it comes to exemption submittals. We have a video that'll be played that will also give some of that guidance. And then on our producer webpage, it may also be helpful just to review any of the identifying cover material guidance, as well as our cover material category guidance. I think that would just be helpful to shed some light and provide some helpful context as folks get ready for those collection requirements to implement.
Great. Thank you, Marcus. Okay, for our next question, this one is for Circular Action Alliance from Toby Mitchell. Last summer, our jurisdiction completed an extensive response to HF&H's SB 54 needs assessment. We received another similar survey yesterday from California, or Circular Action Alliance California. Does CAA have access to our previous response? Emily, you're welcome to jump in on this one.
Yeah, I was talking fast, so you may have missed it or you might have jumped on late, but I did address that. Unfortunately, no, we do not have access to that response. If we did, we would ask you for your questions, I promise you. But yeah, it just the way that, well, I can't really speak to it, but CalRecycle may be able to speak to it, but all I know is we at CAA do not have access to those responses.
Thank you, Emily. All right. Let's go ahead to our next question. This one was from Christine Gonzalez, and any of our panelists who are interested in responding to this one, you're welcome to. The question is, will each end market be visited in person?
Yeah, I can respond to what with a couple of things. So number one, as I mentioned, program plan was just published. A lot more information's out there than was 2 days ago. We have an entire chapter on responsible end markets. So lots of information in there about kind of what the process looks like. I also mentioned the responsible end market standard is under development. That's actually, we're developing kind of as a nationwide standard because there's different programs that are all using some of the same end markets. But very briefly overview the plan, that standard is still in development. It may not be done until the second half of next year. And so we need something in the meantime that we're going to follow the same path that CAA followed in Oregon, which has been working well, which is, an initial, very initial screening of the end markets is going to be more of a self-attestation model. And then we will move into more of a sort of desk audit, data review. And then finally, once we have the standard developed, yes, we will be leveraging a third party to actually go do in-person audits of the responsible end markets, but it will not happen in January of 2027 because we won't have the standard developed and therefore it won't be, it's a timing issue. But yes, eventually there will be in-person audits of facilities.
All right. Thanks, Emily. And while we have you, I do have one more question for you. This one is from Jennifer. The question is, Butte County is so far away from, and again, Jennifer is associated with Butte County here. Butte County is so far away from most facilities that recyclers, sorry, let me restate this one. Is so far away from most facilities that are recyclers that is not cost effective for us to have a contract with any of the Sacramento recyclers. So we pay our haulers to recycle for us. Will this program reimburse us for that cost? And we had a similar question from Valerie Meza.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't quite understand when the part of their like paying haulers to recycle for us. At the end of the day, if there's currently cost prohibitive for you to get your materials to a MRF and then for them to get that to an end market, those transportation costs are costs that we are looking to cover. I mean, if they're currently getting recycled and then they're going to be recycled somewhere further away, and I think that's what I'm not quite understanding about the question. But yeah, if there's currently materials that are going to landfill or not getting processed because of the prohibitively far distances, absolutely, those are the transportation costs that would be covered under SB 54.
Thank you, Emily. And Jennifer, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and clarify that question, you're welcome to jump in here too. Well, actually, it looks like she's no longer in the chat with us here, but maybe we can get to that one later if possible. But we do have one other one for you here from Phoebe Golden. This question is, will there be a cap on costs that jurisdictions/haulers can submit for reimbursement?
No, we do not have a set cap. That's really, it is our responsibility to ensure that we hit the targets. There is no cap that's been set for that at all. It's really, we have to figure out what it's going to cost and then figure out the most, of course, we have to be cost efficient, cost effective, but no, there's not a specific cap that's been set.
Thanks. And I'm seeing in our internal chat here that we do have Jennifer with Butte County here with us. Jennifer, you'd like to unmute yourself and kind of clarify that question you had about recycling. You're definitely welcome to jump in here and clarify that question. Or Valerie, if that's preferable. And I'll just give a couple moments here for you guys to be able to unmute if you'd like to jump in. Okay, let's see. And I just want to clarify the last name. That was Valerie Meza, correct? And Valerie, you should be unmuted now, so you should be able to jump in on that question as long as your microphone is working okay for us. Okay. Well, Valerie, we can't hear you yet, but definitely follow up with us if you have any additional clarification that you're looking for on that, and we will get back to you. So we're going to move ahead here. We have a question from Laura McCaughan with ACI. Under the funding for facilities, how much support would there be for building a new secondary MRF for sorting difficult to recycle items? Can you talk more about this?
Yeah, that is a great question, Laura. I don't think we have a specific budget that says this is our money allocated for secondary sorting, but we are absolutely exploring investing in secondary sorting capacity to augment MRF sortation. Like we're not going to try to do it everywhere all at once, but it is certainly a strategy that CAA is interested in exploring, and that's something that we obviously would have to have a direct conversation with whoever is interested in that. We don't expect just an application to show up one day for an entire new secondary sorting facility. So in our conversations that we're having now with MRF operators and the service providers, anybody who is interested in that avenue, this is a great time to be having that conversation as we figure out that strategy and how to actually implement it in a very strategic, for specific materials, for specific locations, in specific circumstances. There may be a role for secondary sorting. And then for hard to recycle materials, for that, we're also looking at, are there drop-off opportunities for some of the hard to recycle materials as well, where we can expand those.
Perfect. Thank you. And Emily, I do have one more question for you here, and then we'll give you a break for a second. It's another one related to facilities improvements. This one from Kevin Miller. The question is, for facility improvements examples, including optical sorter installation that occurred after January 1st, 2023, but only a portion of the impact would cover uncovered products. Can the jurisdiction apply for a prorated reimbursement for recovery of the uncovered products?
That is a great question and something I didn't have time to put in my presentation. So thank you, Kevin. Yes, the short answer is yes. So if you have, it's a really good example too. So if you did install, let's say you install an optical sorter, and let's just say hypothetically it is sorting PET, and let's say that half of the PET going through your facility is CRV, and half of the PET is not. CRV is not covered under SB 54. Most other PET is. So let's presume that all the other PET is a covered SB 54 material. In that case, the funding would be 50% of the cost. So it is prorated based on the kind of the portion of the material that is covered. And that's for these like very sizable, infrastructural expenses. I don't want to say that that is a hard and fast rule across the board. So an example we sometimes talk about internally is, if you did have to redo some education and outreach materials and only one of 10% of the items on there are SB 54 materials, we're not going to be like, well, that's only 10%, right? Like it doesn't make sense, especially if, the whole thing was prompted by SB 54. So it's not necessarily a super hard and fast rule. There is some discretion there, but when you're talking about big infrastructural expenses, costs for sorting materials, that principle of what portion of it is SB 54 materials does apply.
Perfect. Thanks, Emily. And sorry, I said I was going to give you a break here, and I'm looking at my order, and it looks like I'm not. So you can
That's
stay on
okay.
with us here.
We're here to answer questions.
Perfect. All right. And this one I saw you address, I believe, in the written Q&A tool here, or the built-in one in Zoom. But just in case you want to elaborate, there was another question from Valerie Meza asking, it was, what fee are you talking about? Who is going to be paying this fee? I think it's a fairly straightforward answer, but if you want to elaborate a little bit, you're welcome to.
Oh, the fee. Yeah. Okay. So the fees are, I didn't really explain this because we didn't have enough time, right? So basically the concept with the EPR program is producers who sell packaging or single-use plastic food serviceware in the state of California will have to pay a fee to sell those. So it will be, a certain number of, cents per whatever, right? Like it shows that, if you sell a lot, you pay more. If you sell less, those fees are designed to incentivize packaging design changes. So fees will be higher for hard to recycle items than they are for easier to recycle items. And they tend to be in this program because there's a emphasis on plastic reduction. The fees tend to be higher for plastic than, say, other materials like fiber or aluminum. So that's basically how it works. All the producers report into us, both the tonnage of materials they used in their packaging, as well as the number of units that they have sold. And then we use that information to basically send them a bill and say, okay, you use this much packaging. Here's your invoice. They pay that. That all goes into the fund that then funds what we're talking about here today, the recycling in the system.
Great. Thanks, Emily.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So looking ahead to our next question here, we only have about 3 minutes left or so with this portion of the Q&A before we move on to our next presenter. This question is from Tammy Trong. The question is, what are these surveys for? And I know you talked a little bit, Emily, about how, we have a couple different surveys that have gone out, but if you just want to kind of elaborate on that general purpose, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that the survey that went out last summer was for the needs assessment, and it really was probably very similar to the information that we need, but there's some differences. And like I said, we don't have access to that information. So we're flying a little bit blind here at CAA in terms of what's the landscape out there. So I would say that the two big things we're trying to determine is what is the current state of your program. So what are you currently doing? And then where are the opportunities to do more, to either collect more CMCs, like covered materials that you are not currently collecting, or to increase the recycling rate of those materials that you are currently collecting. So there's questions, for instance, about, what are you doing right now for commercial and multifamily technical assistance? We know that there are jurisdictions out there who are doing a lot, that are visiting every business every year, right sizing, working on contamination, working on best practices. And there's some jurisdictions that may not have the resources to do that at all. Or maybe you're doing a little bit and you wish you could do more. So we're asking questions also, hey, have you incurred any costs already? Like, we need to know that, because we need to send you a check next year and we need to make sure we have the money in the bank to send you that check. Also, what costs do you anticipate incurring? And again, nobody's going to hold you to it. It's not an application. We're also asking things like reuse. Like, we want to, we need to know where there's opportunities to deploy more reuse programs. We're kind of getting all of that information out at once is going to make our reuse manager's life 100 times easier, because then he knows actually, like, where do we go do this? And we're also asking about things like public space recycling and drop off, like really trying to understand the landscape of what's out there and where there's opportunities to do more and what that's going to cost. So I hope that helps to explain it a little bit better. I realize it's not an ideal time. It's never an ideal time to be answering a bunch of questions. So once again, if have a look through it, and if there's questions that you think this is really relevant, this is where I want to spend my time on SB 54, just answer those. That would be fantastic. We really, really appreciate any participation. And again, you also can just book office hours with us and come talk to us and tell us what you want us to know.
Thank you so much, Emily. And that was the last question for real that we had for you for this part of the Q&A, by the way. So thank you so much for being a champ and answering all of those. We have a final question for this portion of the Q&A. We'll have some additional live Q&A further along in the webinar after our other presenters. Our last question here is for CalRecycle. The question is from Phoebe Golden, the question being, why were these materials identified as recyclable/compostable if there is not yet an end market? Marcus, I see you're ready to jump in here, so go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So one thing statute required was an early publication of the covered material categories list. So a lot of this data is based on SB 343 recyclability determinations, as well as for at least compostability labeling requirements under AB 1201. I will recommend, if you'd like, we do explain a lot of the findings based on the current data that we had available for all of our CMC determinations on our CMC list document. So I'll go ahead and share that publication in the chat, and that should definitely provide a lot more of that context in terms of how we did a lot of this determinations without the end markets that haven't been identified by the PRO yet. But yeah, I'll share that very soon. And thanks, Zach.
Perfect. Thank you, Marcus. So we had probably over 10 questions that we didn't have time to get to during this portion of the live Q&A. If there are any questions that we were unable to answer during this webinar, we will get back to you afterwards. But we're going to jump into our next presentation here so we don't get behind on time. Addie, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Zach, for moderating the first Q&A. The next presentation will discuss CalRecycle's jurisdiction enforcement. Presenting is Mark DeBee, who serves as CalRecycle's Deputy Director of the Division of Waste Permitting, Compliance, and Mitigation. Mark joined CalRecycle in 1990 after working for Stanislaus County Environmental Health. Mark has also worked as a high school science teacher in California, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Sierra Leone, West Africa. During his time with CalRecycle, he has worked as a facility inspector and as a supervisor for inspections, SECA, and permitting, and the Solid Waste Local Enforcement Agency training program. Mark has a Bachelor of Arts degree in Biological Sciences from Humboldt State University and a Master of Science degree in Marine Science from California State University Stanislaus Moss Landing Marine Laboratories.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for joining the webinar today. If I could get my slide up next. Oh, we'll find it. But maybe while we're doing that, I did ask Kara to step in and talk about the assistance first aspect of what I wanted to share, because LAM is going to continue to carry out their great efforts with assisting jurisdictions and finding ways to bring 54 into that process. So I think she's the best spokesperson for that. Darren, you
Hey,
had the
thanks.
slide up for a minute. You can find it again, I think.
Hey, thanks, Mark. So I'd like to follow up on the vision and expectations that Zoe shared in her opening remarks regarding CalRecycle's continued approach with jurisdictions, and that is taking a compliance assistance first approach, using our reimbursement tools when they're necessary. Similarly to how CalRecycle implemented the SB 1383 regulations for jurisdictions, we plan to do the same with the implementation of the SB 54 requirements for local jurisdictions, focused on their collection systems. Many jurisdictions have expressed concern about the enforcement process, and they did that early on with 1383. So we're here today to assure you that we are taking that same assistance first approach with SB 54. We want to provide technical assistance where clarity and tools are needed for jurisdictions. And as we're doing today in today's webinar, we want to share how jurisdictions are assessing their collection programs and aligning them with the covered materials categories and with the existing and future responsible end markets that will be created. And Leslie is going to talk a bit more about that. We want to answer questions and explain expectations that you have. For example, there are a number of questions that I've already answered some. Mark and Marcus will also be addressing at the end of their presentations because we've heard that these are the most pressing questions on your mind. We want to continue building out the tools and guidance on our website and collaborating with CAA as they develop their tools and guidance. Also, CAA, Emily, not to put you on the spot, but CAA is going to have a team that will work closely with jurisdictions, similar to CalRecycle's local assistance team. And if you have questions about that, Emily can share more. But I really hope after today's webinar that you feel a sense of relief and more clarity. So Mark, I'd like to turn it back to you for a deeper dive on this topic.
Thanks, Kara. I'm doing this presentation because I do oversee the team that is focused on 1383 compliance issues, and will also a different team that will be focused on 54. So I cover both programs and encouraging those teams to work together in sharing information and experiences so that the implementation of 54 looks consistent with 1383 and there's a smooth transition for jurisdictions in continuing to comply with 1383 requirements and then adding into the 54 requirements. So a lot of what I'm going to share, I think, has been shared already, but I'll add a few extra details and specifics. But I wanted to emphasize around assistance first, and then also going into the actual compliance process, that we will continue to share and explain expectations. So this is one of the first steps with this webinar, is to make sure everyone has an opportunity to understand what the expectations are for local government in 54. And we'll continue to do that, as Kara indicated, through various methods and pathways. The compliance evaluation process is going to be one that is done transparently. So before we start any evaluations, we'll make sure that people understand what that process is going to look like and how we will connect and interact with jurisdictions as we move through that process. And that process will also provide multiple opportunities for feedback and adjustments. With anything new and the implementation of new things, there's always unexpected things that we encounter. And so we want to make sure that our process has opportunities to hear back from jurisdictions and others, get that feedback, and make appropriate adjustments. I know the timing has been an issue and a question about when these evaluations might begin. So I wanted to set some context around that. Um, as Emily indicated, a plan has been submitted. It's being reviewed, and that process can potentially take 6 months. So we're not really going to start any active evaluations until that plan is reviewed and approved, as well as we're going to wait for the exemption process to run before, again, we start any active evaluations. So that's a 6 months plus process before you could expect any engagement relative to the compliance side of things. And again, during that 6 months, there's going to be outreach and assistance provided and as we move through. Our primary focus at the beginning is going to be looking at how the plan, once it's approved, is implemented and are the requirements being met. There'll be some early requirements that will need to be assessed and evaluated. And so that will be a focus, is the plan implementation. And as you heard from Emily, the PRO does a lot of things, is required to do a lot of things, and a lot of those will be aspects that will support local government in their efforts to be a good partner with the 54 process. And so we want to make sure that those the plan is implemented and implemented appropriately. The regulations does include steps of the evaluation and the compliance process, and so we'll be following those. With all statute and regulation, there's also a need to provide guidance, that level of clarity, again, to help explain expectations. And so I fully expect that as part of the assistance, and then as we move into the compliance process, that there will be guidance provided as questions and issues come up. And again, we're planning to have opportunities for feedback and to make adjustments as needed too. I will point out too that there are the regs do allow a pathway to address and correct issues. I'm referencing the corrective action plan process, so that if at any time any entity that's involved with 54 is struggling with compliance, there is an opportunity to provide a pathway to compliance through the corrective action plan, similar to what has been used early on in the 1383 process through statute, but also as a part of the ongoing process of 1383. We built a corrective action plan process with 1383 in mind. And then I know there's been a lot of questions, and I think we've provided some answers already to the nexus between 1383. I'll also bring in MCR and more, which are also programs implemented by jurisdictions. The information that's generated out of those programs will be used for the 54 effort. Initially, it's going to be used to help us set priorities. There's 600 plus jurisdictions. We're not going to carry out a process that's evaluating all of them at the same time. And so we're going to need some initial information to set some priorities to evaluate where there's issues that can be addressed appropriately through a compliance evaluation. And so having information coming to us through those programs would be helpful. And I think you've also heard early on that we're looking at the EAR process as being one method for jurisdictions to add in what they're doing, changing relative to 54. There's no requirement to report anything to us from local jurisdictions. So it would be a voluntary step that jurisdictions take if they want to start including 54 information in that year. And that's pretty much the overview of where we're at with planning for the implementation of the compliance on local government. And so hopefully I'm starting that effort to explain expectations, and you find this short presentation helpful. I'm sure there's going to be a number of questions, so I'll be ready to help answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And we do have a couple questions here for you, so we'll jump right into them. Our first question is, jurisdictions must include all recyclable/compostable covered materials in our programs by the time the program plan is approved. How should we document the materials that we collect?
Great, thank you, Zach. So again, there is no requirement for jurisdictions to document the material they collect. However, documenting CMC collection can be a good practice, particularly if it can be integrated into the existing document practice. Also keep in mind a certain amount of documentation may be needed when working with the PRO. We have a couple of examples of ways that you could document CMC collection. And thanks to Kara and her team for sharing some of these ideas early on with the compliance program. Leslie is going to share today an approach for jurisdictions that could utilize now to access the collection programs compared to covered materials and documents that and information using for example, a spreadsheet. And then again, CalRecycle plans to update the electronic annual reporting system, the EAR, so that jurisdictions can easily identify covered materials they are collecting in the recycling and organic system. The plan is for this to be available in the EAR sometime in 2027. CalRecycle will verify that local jurisdictions' collection and recycling programs include all covered materials included in the covered materials categories, the CMC list associated with 54. And we will determine compliance by looking at, again, available data, such as what's coming through 1383 efforts. But we will also be looking at information that's generated through the exemptions and extension process, data submitted to the department through other programs and other data sources. We'll be looking at that data through the lens of statutory and regulatory requirements and evaluating the evidence to support compliance status and determine if the requirements have been made. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. See, we have one more for you here. And I know you touched on this question a little bit earlier in your presentation, but the question was, when will CalRecycle begin review of jurisdictions for compliance with this requirement?
Yeah, so again, the first focus is going to be on compliance assistance. It's not going to be sort of an on-off switch that we use. We'll slowly ramp up. We'll be setting priorities and moving through those priorities relative to compliance. We'll be monitoring the exemption and plan review process because that will inform our compliance assistance efforts, as well as helping us understand where the greatest needs are in terms of potential compliance. Again, it's not an on-off. I can't give you a date, but we will eventually be evaluating where jurisdictions are in meeting the 54 requirements for collection. We'll be focused on supporting jurisdictions. We'll be focused on if the PRO is implementing the plan and those elements that will be designed to support jurisdictions. Jurisdictions are not required to establish responsible end markets, and I know that's been an issue, and so I want to emphasize that they are required to collect the materials, but they're not required by statute or regulation to ensure end markets. I think maybe the best way to think about 54 compliance implementation is think about how 1383 was approached and think of it that way, because that's the model we'll be using going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, our next question here is as follows. The regulations state jurisdictions and service providers must collect and transfer materials to REMs. The regs also allow for exemptions when REMs aren't available. In addition to access to REMs, jurisdictions will need access to producer funding. Should jurisdictions request exemptions for the materials they collect but can't confirm are being sent to REMs? Or can CalRecycle give certainty that jurisdictions will not be enforced upon for the and transfer material to REMs portion of the law?
Great. We've touched on this again, but it's always good to emphasize it. So jurisdictions are not required to establish responsible end markets or to ensure that their service providers are getting it to a responsible market. The regulations require the collection of CMCs be transferred either to an REM, or an end market, or to a intermediate supply chain entity. And those can be entities like transfer processing facilities or material recovery facilities. You might recall that Zoe noted in her opening remarks that CalRecycle will be dedicated to providing support to the jurisdictions so they can build programs that align with the responsibilities associated with end markets. And the focus is going to be on the PRO implementing the plan to build those responsible end markets and systems for reuse and refill. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, our next question is, what additional advice or guidance can CalRecycle give for local jurisdiction compliance, given the program plan is still under development, which means REMs are not identified and funding for jurisdictions is not clear? Mark, go ahead.
So, as someone that's involved with evaluations and compliance, I'm hesitant to give advice because then sometimes it comes back and say, well, you said I should do it that way. So, but in the lens of providing assistance, I'll just note that it might be a good idea for jurisdictions to focus on now what they're currently collecting. And I'm sure jurisdictions are doing that already. And through that assessment, then they'd be able to determine if there are covered materials that are not currently being collected. And they should start steps earlier than later to start planning out for ways to collect those materials. If they can show that local conditions or challenges make the collection impracticable for covered materials, then certainly take advantage of the extension and exemption process. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, our next question here is from Destiny Garcia. The question is, can jurisdictions perform random and unscheduled site visits to businesses to ensure compliance and to get an understanding of what contamination levels look like at a given location?
I'll attempt to answer that one. I think 1383 does have requirements around jurisdictions evaluating what are in bins. They do that through route reviews. Some businesses can be evaluated for sort of food recovery aspects through inspections. And so I would expect that a jurisdiction doing route reviews for organics could think about ways that they could look for the 54 CMCs at the same time, but that would be up to the jurisdiction to determine what how they want to approach that. Zach, you're muted.
Thank you, Mark. And Kara, I see your camera's on, so I'll let you jump in here too.
Yeah, Mark, that was such a great response. I just wanted to add, it's also really important for jurisdictions to remember that part of your requirements for 1383 is fibers and wood materials as well. And that's where we see that overlap, right, with 54 covered materials, with fiber and wood single-use packaging. So, when you are doing contamination monitoring, we expect, and the regs lay out, that monitoring is done on all of the streams. So if you have a 3-stream container, you're monitoring what's going in that gray container, as well as the blue container and the green container, to educate generators on getting things properly sorted. So I think also Emily spoke to some of the activities that might be reimbursed. And so this is something for jurisdictions to have conversations with CAA about. If you're doing a lot of work on contamination monitoring, you see an opportunity where maybe more data could be collected on some of the covered material categories or covered material items. So just be thinking about that. Thanks, Mark.
And thank you, Kara. Okay. And I did want to provide an opportunity here. Destiny, if you have any follow-up questions, you're free to unmute yourself here and chime in too. All right. I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next question here, and then we may be able to get back to Destiny later as needed. Our next question is, as we successfully remove more organic materials from the landfill cart to the organics cart, we're going to need many more compost facilities. What additional tools is CalRecycle planning to use to ensure more compost facilities are brought rapidly online? And any of our panelists are welcome to jump in here too, but Mark, if you want to get started, you're welcome to.
Well, I'll let either Kara or Michelle do that. I know that there's grant programs, and Kara is our local assistance guru, so she can talk about what some jurisdictions are doing to expand their compost infrastructure.
Yeah, and thanks, Mark. Maybe a couple of things. I don't want to get too off track on this because, again, today we're focused on single-use packaging, food serviceware. When it relates to 1383, we're talking about single-use packaging that's fiber or wood types of materials. So don't want to get too far off track onto 1383, but certainly there are a number of things with respect to the significant amount of funding that we've provided in the organics infrastructure grants. We'll be working on a new programmatic environmental impact report for small and medium composting facilities. So a lot of work in the space. Jurisdictions continue to assess their capacity needs to really determine how much capacity is needed. And they're working, for those that maybe have a gap in capacity, are working on that. So hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Kara. That definitely is. Yeah. Okay. We have time for a couple more questions here. Our next question here is ZWM's member jurisdictions. I'm assuming that's Zero Waste Marin. Member jurisdictions have yet to receive draft findings reports for SB 1383. We may have gaps in our programs that we are unaware of. What is the timeline for SB 54 communication, especially related to program gaps?
I think it's premature to get into timelines for things that aren't actually required yet. So it would be hard for me to provide a solid response to that. We do continue to improve the timelines in 1383. We're learning from that process. And so I don't expect the 54 processes will they'll benefit from our experience with 1383 and not be as prolonged as some of the timelines have been in 1383. So, but again, I think it's a little early to predict timelines.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, our next question is next question is from Malika Sen with Solana Center. Some cities that we consult to have had the question if they can just stay with CAA's education and outreach efforts, or if they need to do more. Additionally, if required recycling rates are not met in certain jurisdictions, who will be held responsible, and what would be the compliance implications? Let's see. And Mark, if you want to jump on this one, you're welcome to. It sounds like there's also some reference to Circular Action Alliance in here too. So Emily, if you feel like you have something to share, you're welcome to.
Sure. Yeah. So I think there's two questions there. One was about the required use of materials, and one was about achieving recycling rates. Is that right? I'll take those in reverse order. The recycling rates one is easy. The recycling rate is a industry-wide obligation, and that compliance obligation falls on the producer responsibility organization. So no jurisdiction is responsible for achieving any recycling rate. It's just that we, as CAA and the entire producer community, are required to fund and support the system such that those recycling rates are achieved. So that is entirely a pro obligation to hit those recycling rates. In terms of use of materials for education and outreach, again, we are still working on the very specifics. We haven't developed any materials, so we certainly can't tell you have to use them. We will be working on materials and having focus groups and inviting jurisdictions and service providers to participate in the development of those. I don't think there's any universe in which we would say you can only use our materials. That's it. But there may be some cases where we're developing certain statewide messaging where it would not be productive for education and outreach outcomes, or whether it would not be cost efficient for then a jurisdiction to independently develop the same materials and the same messaging. So all of that we are still figuring out. But generally speaking, our plan is to provide materials that are supportive and not have duplicative efforts between jurisdictions and CAA. But we are not trying to come in and take over and say, you have to use our stuff, you can't do your own thing anymore. We're really trying to build a program that is complementary to current efforts. I hope that helps to answer the question.
Yes, Emily, it definitely does. And Mark, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Nope. Thanks.
Thank you. That is it for this portion of the Q&A session. And as I mentioned before, I know we had some that we didn't have time to get to here, but we will respond to you later. So I'm going to pass things back over to Addie to kick off our next presenter.
Thank you, Zach. The next presentation will cover how jurisdictions can assess the SB 54 covered material categories in their collection programs. Leslie Lukash has over 25 years of leadership in solid waste and resource management industry. As Executive Director of Zero Waste Sonoma, Leslie oversees comprehensive programs in household hazardous waste, recycling, organics, and zero waste across 10 jurisdictions in Sonoma County. Prior to this role, Leslie served for 13 years as the Director of Zero Waste at SCS Engineers, a consulting firm specializing in solid waste, recycling, and organics management. She also founded and operated her own zero waste consulting business for 7 years. She is a past president of the National Recycling Coalition, NRC, and serves on the board of directors of Californians Against Waste.
Great. Thank you for the introduction. And so I just want to say that we are in the initial stages of implementation. So as we're receiving the program plan that CAA just submitted, we're still reviewing materials and coordinating through CalRecycle. So this is what we're doing, and it's in the initial phase of the process. So next slide. So who Zero Waste Sonoma is we are a joint powers authority that was formed in '92 due to implementing AB 939. We have a governing board of 10 member jurisdictions. It's the 9 cities and the county. We serve roughly 500,000 people. And as mentioned, we coordinate regional waste reduction, recycling, organics, household hazardous waste, and outreach and compliance programs on behalf of our 10 member jurisdictions. Next slide. And so with that, our objective for implementing 54 is really to support our member jurisdictions in compliance and the cost reimbursements. We also want to improve consistency in Sonoma County jurisdictions' acceptability list of what's recyclable and compostable, and so that we reduce consumer confusion about what goes in the right bin. And then we also are looking to coordinate our efforts regionally and statewide. And the goal is very much like Oregon, if you see the education piece to the right, where this is coming from the state, and it's one messaging of what materials are truly recyclable and compostable across Oregon, who is implementing their EPR law on packaging. Next slide. So the activities that we've been involved with so far is we've been attending the SB 54 advisory board meetings. We have had quite a bit of interaction with Circular Action Alliance. I have been meeting with them, I believe, monthly or every other month for the last year plus, along with other jurisdictions. We have also started a regional approach. So there is a group of JPA executive directors. We meet quarterly for probably the last 2 years, and we decided to start focusing our meetings on 54. And in April, we convened a almost day-long workshop with the JPAs in person with the executive directors, as well as we had CA come in for half the day. And we kind of looked at 54 as a regional approach, especially as we go through the covered materials list. And then we've also started the engagement with our 10 local jurisdictions. We started the process for reimbursements. We do have a labor code that we have set internally so that staff, we can all track anything that we do, anything that we work towards 54. So we're starting that tracking already. And so once the portal opens for reimbursement, then I'll go ahead and submit reimbursement for all of our time that we've dedicated to 54 so far. And then we, as mentioned, we're coordinating with JPAs across California as we move forward. And then we have already started researching a data management software. We had a meeting actually just this week with Smart 1383, who does our 1383 software data management, and we met regarding the EAR as well as 54 so that we could likely consolidate all of that management into one data management system. Next slide. And key items that I'm tracking is just that reimbursement process, fully understanding the roles between CalRecycle, CAA, the producers, as well as the haulers, and our responsibilities as government. And then we're currently working on the covered materials list, which I'll be going into. We are trying to understand exemptions or materials that need to be added, and then also understanding responsible end markets. So there's more to be coming on that from CAA. As mentioned, the program plan was just submitted or released 5 days ago, and we have until August 14th to review that. We're going to be reviewing that internally as well as with the other JPAs. And so we may have one voice that's submitting our response and or doing it just as a JPA. And then looking at the education requirements. So many implementation details remain under development, as you've seen through this presentation, and will continue to evolve. And I believe we are evolving in a collaborative way, which is really nice. Next. So potential impacts to 54, I'm not saying these are the impacts, but potential impacts are maybe looking at the franchise agreements and service contracts that are in place. If there has to be changes, I'm not clear about that yet. Recycling collection system changes, as jurisdictions, we should understand if the MRFs have to go through upgrades and what kind of investments that are happening, so that if we have materials that are in our covered materials list, that we know that they're getting processed properly. And then, as mentioned, the education and outreach components and efforts to reduce contamination, and then just planning for the future capacity needs or infrastructure needs. That's where that close relationship with the haulers are in place, because we have to make sure that there are these responsible end markets at the end. And then again, that reimbursement mechanism that should be operating hopefully soon. Next slide. So as mentioned, local jurisdictions must collect covered materials deemed to be recyclable and compostable. And this goes into effect on January 1st, 2027. So what that means is from now until essentially December 31st, us as jurisdictions, we need to have our exemption list done. So actually, next slide will show you. So we must be able to include what's recyclable and what's compostable. And then next slide. So these are the two pathways for jurisdictions to be in compliance. So that's really what my presentation is going to focus on next, is going through the covered materials list. So next slide. how materials are deemed recyclable and compostable are laws that were already put into place. One is SB 343, and as a reminder, that was that truth in labeling law, that if you have that recycling chasing arrow on your product, that it truly is recyclable. And what that is defined as is that materials must be collected by programs serving at least 60% of the state's population and sorted by at least 60% of the facilities across the state. So next slide. And then for compostable products, this is AB 1201, and that is the law that designated what materials are compostable in California. Next slide. You can actually pass the next slide too. So exemptions that were mentioned. There are several ways that you can exempt a product into your list, and those are operational challenges, environmental and community impacts, and just system constraints. And I think the biggest thing, as mentioned, is that the materials must go to a responsible end market, which CAA is going to identify for us. So as we look at the exemptions list that we're creating as a jurisdiction, keeping those items in mind as you go through the list is helpful to understand if it is exempted or not. Next slide. So getting into the covered materials list. On the CalRecycle page, two yellow arrows are about to pop up on your screen. There are the covered materials categories list, which was published, which has been updated since January of 2026, as well as the second item is the covered material category producer reporting guideline. As a jurisdiction, we need to look at both of these documents side by side so we can better determine what materials are included or not. So next slide. So what you will see in the covered material category list is category ID, material classification, material type, and form of material. So in the category ID, you see it starts with the number 25. That is the year that material has been put into the category list. That list can be updated every year until 2032. So from now until then, every year CalRecycle may be updating, will be updating this list. And then you'll know when that 25 turns to year 26 or 27, that's when that material will be added or taken away from this list. So on the list right now is 95 material classifications. As of right now, 56 of those locations are deemed recyclable or compostable in the CMC. So I'm going to call the covered materials category list CMCs from now on. And as you can see on the Excel or the chart on the right, where you see green with a Y, that means that CalRecycle has deemed that yes is a covered material. So 56 of those have the yes. 45 of those are considered recyclable, 21 of the materials are considered compostable, and 14 are considered both recyclable and compostable. Next slide. And then now going into the covered materials category producer reporting guideline, this is what it looks like on the front page. And this is a guidance for categorizing covered materials into the covered material category. So that's why you have to use these two documents side by side. Next slide. This is just for the producers themselves. There's a yes/no flow chart on if the material is covered or not. But and there's examples of what's covered or not for the producer. So for example, the salsa jar has a glass packaging and the metal lid. Both of those are considered two different material types that are covered under the list. Same with like the hairspray and the cap. Those are two different materials, although it's one product. Next. So I mentioned about looking at these two documents side by side. So that is really what we're doing internally as a JPA so that we can better understand what's included and not included, but based on these new definitions. So next slide. Darren, the person who's moving the slide forward, he's going to have a fun time with this one because there's some action in this slide. But so let's just zone in onto one of the material types, and we'll take the fiber paper, craft paper. So what's going to be popping up is the examples within the producer guide of what that includes. So this is an example of a product that has no plastic in it and is considered recyclable and compostable. So as a jurisdiction, we need to understand these definitions so that we can say, okay, does that meet our current collection system? So next is craft paper with plastic in it. So that is considered recyclable and compostable, but you see compostable has that asterisk. So next pop-up is what the asterisk means. And so the asterisk means a compostable determination for the CMC does not imply that all covered materials within the CMC is compostable, but signifies that covered materials within the CMC is not disqualified from being eligible. So that is a little bit confusing for us because for us, we don't accept craft paper with plastic on it in our compost system. And I don't even know if we accept it in our recycling system, but certainly not in our, the composters do not want paper with plastic on it. And then same if you go to the next one with the molded fiber with plastic components. The further definition of that product, that means that it's fiber and it's poly-coated or plastic coated on one side. If it's plastic coated on both sides, it's not a covered material, but if it's plastic on one side, then it is considered a covered material, which we do not accept in our compostable system. Great, so next slide. The devil is in the details with this covered materials list. So this is just another way of looking at the two documents. Again, going to the material type definition. This is just taking white paper, all forms with plastic components. You go into the arrow going down into what that actually means. So again, this means white paper that's one-sided poly-coated or plastic coated, but not two-sided. And then we go farther into the examples of its, white envelopes with that, glass window. That's fine. But shipping paper products, white expandable paper packaging products with plastics on it. I need clarification from our jurisdictions if that's or from our haulers if that's accepted or not. The next one down, the mixed fibers, mixed paper, that one's fine. But when you get into paper fiber with plastic components, again, this is the poly-coated mixed paper items on the single side. But if you go further into the definition, it actually states what's included. And one of the things in that material type is meat. When you buy meat in the grocery store, there's that pad that is that absorbent pad. Well, that's included in the definition on the producer guide. And that certainly is not a recyclable or compostable product. So one of our questions is, so if you're including that as an example, do we have to do we have to do an exemption for that entire material type? Or get down to the weeds and say, no, we do not accept meat absorbent pads for recycling and composting. Same with butter wrappers are the same. So next slide. So what we are doing now is we are matching the CMC categories in between our three haulers. So we've created our own Excel spreadsheet. Actually, I want to say this, I'm going to give out props to Stop Waste because this is really from Michelle Fay, those of you who know her at Stop Waste, and Timothy Burrows, who's on the advisory board. They really have taken the lead in this. So as I go through this Excel spreadsheet, this is really from Stop Waste that we are now doing ourselves. And so, yeah, a huge shout out to Michelle and Timothy because they're really leading it for us jurisdictions. So we're just taking their document and updating it for us. And so next slide. So what we need to do is in our Excel spreadsheet is we have our 10 jurisdictions, and then we have our 3 haulers who are color coded, and we are going through the CMC list. We know there's 56 CMCs out of the 95 material types listed. So we have to take it material type by material type. We have to understand in our jurisdictions if there's like outliers, are there some materials that we can easily add into our CMC list that our haulers aren't accepting right now. We also are going to be doing countywide exemptions on materials that we're not currently accepting or likely will not accept in the future. And then just there's also going to be items that we're just not really clear and we need more clarifications. So we would likely reach out to CAA to help us determine if it needs to be included or not, as well as reaching out to CalRecycle. So as mentioned in the very beginning, there's a lot of just collaboration that has to happen with implementing this law. Next slide. So just potential exemption requests. We may be exempting that, as I mentioned, that paper-based packaging with plastic linings, mixed material paper products like the meat absorbent pads or the paper butter wrappers that I mentioned, small format metal packaging that might be too small for our MRFs. The CalRecycle deems a product recyclable if it's 2 inches or larger. So we have to make sure that our MRFs are set to 2 inches so that it complies. And then right now, compostable plastic packaging is a covered material. We do not accept compostable packaging in Sonoma County. We have stated that we did a whole like a year-long white paper probably about 5 years ago, not accepting compostable plastics. None of our compost facilities want to receive compostable plastics or do receive compostable plastics. I think that's the same for probably 95% of the state, yet this material is a covered material. So this is something that we're going to have to look into further. I believe there is a composting facility in San Diego that does accept compostable plastics, but that's certainly not 60% of the state. Well, I guess that's 343. But anyway, next slide. So potentially add-ons that might be easy. Maybe the steel packaging jars that's on the CMC list. Maybe some of the thorough forms that the MRFs might collect separately, but we might need to look at the thorough forms, maybe some of the rigid thorough forms as well. So really it's once we get through our CMC list with our member jurisdictions, the next step is for us to meet with our haulers and dive into these material types even further so that we can fully get our exemption list, our add-on list done. So next slide. So next steps for us is just we're continuing with the process, reviewing the new plan that CAA just created or just submitted. As mentioned, we have until August 14th to provide our feedback. So we're going to be working on that. Ongoing, I recommend attending the advisory board meetings so you can stay engaged with the various stakeholders. Working with local government to prepare, the collection impacts and understanding our franchise agreements, if anything needs to change there, and any infrastructure changes in our region. We're going to continue to work with the JPAs. The JPAs and us meet monthly now with CAA so that we can have this open dialogue. And then questions we are continuing to track is the reimbursement framework and eligible costs that we can reimburse for, just clearly identifying roles and responsibilities between jurisdictions and service providers, the responsible end markets, and any changes to our programs and public outreach requirements. But we're really working towards continuous improvements as we implement the law. Next slide. So just as a closer, SB 54 is not limited to what's recyclable today. It is intentionally designed to force producers to redesign packaging to finance systems so more materials can be recyclable, compostable, and reusable over time. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you so much, Leslie. We're going to jump into our third Q&A session here. And Leslie, some of these questions will be for you. Some of them maybe our CalRecycle staff can answer as well. The first one being one of those that is directed at our CalRecycle panelists here. The question is from HF&H, and it is, if a local jurisdiction does not collect a specific covered material category because their RSP does not accept or cannot process it, is it the responsibility of the local jurisdiction or the RSP to submit an exemption request? In what instance would an RSP submit a collection exemption versus the local jurisdiction?
Hey, Zach, I'm going to go ahead and ask that we wait on that one because I think it aligns well with one of the questions that Marcus is going to respond to. So let's hold, and if we don't nail it with Marcus's response, then we can come back to it. Okay?
That sounds great. We'll move that one
Right.
further down then. Okay. Our next question then is from Wes Yates. The question is, what should a jurisdiction do going forward if the contracted hauler, who also operates the MRF, can't or won't recycle certain covered materials due to negative economic value? Will there eventually be enforcement on the jurisdiction? And Leslie, you're welcome to jump in here, but if any other panelists want to respond, you're welcome to jump in as well.
I was going to say CalRecycle.
Yeah, it might be good for Mark. I mean, if Mark is on, this is really focused on for example, a hauler that is not complying. So I'm not sure we have a lot of specifics right now to be able to answer this question directly beyond what's laid out in the regulations, the enforcement section. Mark, are you on?
I am on. Yeah, I think it's too early to be able to give a comprehensive or even a beginning of an answer to this. So sorry.
Yeah, and I think Mark mentioned earlier, the jurisdiction is responsible for collecting the materials, but they're not responsible for, the upstream, right? Those further on in that recycling process, making that happen.
Thank you, Kara and Mark. All right, Leslie, another question for you here from a different Leslie O'Malley, looks like. Because the program is reimbursement based, have you considered the barrier for jurisdictions to front the new cost to meet compliance?
At this point, the cost that we are experiencing is just our time. I don't know, and I suppose if a jurisdiction has a consultant who's helping them implement 54, maybe there's cost there too. But in our case, we are implementing it on our own right now. So as mentioned, I do have all of our everyone at Zero Waste Sonoma, if we're working on 54, we've set up a labor code. So once that reimbursement portal is open, we will be reimbursing for our time. And that's how we're managing it now. And I see Emily popped up.
I did. Thanks, Leslie. I just wanted to clarify one thing. So we use the word reimbursement a lot. I think we've got a little bit of work to do on our terminology because while the general plan is costs incurred and then reimbursed after the fact, if you read which I'm sure you haven't read yet, but this is addressed in the reimbursements chapter of the program plan that in cases where it's not practical for the entity who's being reimbursed to first outlay the cost, the capital, the cash to do the thing, but there'll be some circumstances in which we may be able to do more of an upfront payment model as well. So it's really going to be sort of circumstance based on what kind of costs we're talking about, what level of costs, what the financial circumstances are of the recipient, that kind of thing. But I didn't want the word reimbursement to connote that 100% of everything is only going to be reimbursed after the fact.
Thanks, Emily, for clarifying, and thank you, Leslie. Our next question is from Jennifer Gilbert. The question for Leslie is, could you share the covered material categories Excel spreadsheet that you shared that you got from Stopways?
Yes, I'm happy to share it.
Okay, great. So we'll provide that after the webinar at some point.
It might be nice if there is, if CalRecycle or CAA, if you can create an Excel spreadsheet for us, because the thing with my Excel spreadsheet is I have 10 jurisdictions and 3 haulers. So if I share it, it's going to be confusing because many jurisdictions is 1 city and 1 hauler, where mine's going to be way more complicated because it's 3 haulers and 10 cities. So if you guys can give us an Excel spreadsheet, that would be super helpful.
Perfect. Thank you, Leslie. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Kara.
something for us to think about, Leslie, and then we can also think about how, in the interim, to be able to share what you're using, what's the best way to do that, so that you're not getting maybe 600 emails.
Thanks, Kara. Okay, this next one is for either Leslie or CalRecycle. What do you recommend we do if a covered material category is not accepted by a compost facility that we are in contract with to send our materials to? Is that where we apply for an exemption?
From my
This is,
understanding, oh, go ahead.
yeah, this is probably another one that I would recommend we hold until Marcus's presentation, because I think it, well, for me, he'll be addressing that, and then we could come back if not. Leslie, was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just want to add, you know, even though we don't accept it, I don't know how this law is going to play out in the future. But if producers say that there is a responsible end market, it might be that as materials come, that we will have to look at other ways to manage this material. I'm not saying that like compostable plastics in our composters are going to want it, but maybe like down the road, something's going to happen and infrastructure is going to change in our state for some of these materials that we're looking to exempt. And then producers are going to say, well, hey, there's a responsible end market that we've created. So now you should be including that material type into your program.
Thanks, Leslie. So we will move that one down and kind of get Marcus's response to that one too when we get to that last Q&A session. But for now, Leslie, we have another question for you from Laura Coffin. We had the same question of butter wrappers, meat absorbent pads. I missed this, but are you saying that butter wrappers are compostable in your programs or are not? And if not, why not?
They're not a compostable material type in our program. Designated by our composters, yes.
Okay. And let's see, our next question here, this is a longer one, so bear with me. But this is another one for you, Leslie, from Jasmine Haddon. In Leslie's presentation, I understood that jurisdictions are expected to review both material lists and determine which products may be eligible for an exemption. For jurisdictions with an exclusive franchised hauler and processing facility, can the jurisdiction rely on the hauler and or processor to conduct this review and identify materials they are unable to collect or process?
It's the jurisdiction's responsibility to submit the exemption list to CalRecycle by the end of the year. So we do have to take the lead on that. But I would imagine the jurisdiction would do that in conjunction with their hauler. You have to get into the weeds of every single material type and that cover materials list and the definitions and the examples and go through it almost one by one of what's been provided by CalRecycle so that you have the right CMC list for your city. But ideally, we will, I mean, the goal I think is for the entire state to have the same CMC list. So that's why we're working on it with the JPA approach of the JPAs working together, because if we work together and going through that CMC list and hash it out, then at least regionally, the materials are the same. And also with the JPAs, we're working with, many cities at the same time if we can all just work together. So we're covering, I forget the number of cities in the JPAs. There's about 14 of us JPAs that meet on this and also meet quarterly. And so that coordination is really important to the more we coordinate, the less confusion there's going to be for the regular person who stands with the bin with their compostable product and their recyclable product and not knowing like what goes where. So that's what we want to reduce is that confusion statewide for people.
Thanks, Leslie. And there was sort of a second part to that question too. Speaking of collaboration, which is if a hauler serves multiple jurisdictions but is not part of a JPA and wants to pursue a bulk exemption request, who would be responsible for submitting it?
It'd still be the city.
Perfect. Thank you. So I think this is going to be our last question here before we move on to our final presentation. This one from Kevin Miller. What should we do for equipment labeling and education given AB 1201 for compostability of products, particularly for certified organic compost facilities? And Leslie, if you feel like you can answer this one, jump in. If not, any of our other panelists can help you out here too.
I don't think I can answer that one.
Totally fine. Thank you. And for some of these too, we'll also be able to follow up with more information after the webinar as well, if we can't answer it live here today.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to close. I know you're finishing up, but I just want to reiterate that us jurisdictions, we only have until August 14th to comment on CAA's program plan. So I highly recommend that you read that and submit a letter. As JPAs, we've also talked about writing a joint letter. Maybe some of the other organizations are looking at writing joint letters. And then also for jurisdictions, as a reminder, we only have from now until December 31st to submit our CMC list to CalRecycle. So it's already June. That gives us less than 6 months to get this down. And maybe I'm a little bit more stressed about I'm working with 10 jurisdictions, but it's an undertaking to submit that and get it done within the next 6 months.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. We definitely hear that. And thank you again, Leslie, for responding to these questions and helping out with the Q&A today. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next presentation. So I'll pass things off to Addie.
Thank you, Zach. Presenting next is Marcus Santillano. Marcus has worked for CalRecycle for 18 years and currently serves as program manager for the Packaging Extended Producer Responsibility EPR program, overseeing implementation of SB 54. Prior to this role, he worked in CalRecycle's permitting and assistance branch, where he provided guidance and technical expertise on solid waste regulations, including implementation of SB 1383. He also served on CalRecycle's incident management team, overseeing 7 wildfire debris removal operations in the state. Throughout his career, Marcus has collaborated with local governments, industry, regulatory agencies, and other interested parties. He holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Environmental Studies with a minor in Geography from California State University, Sacramento.
Great. Thanks so much for the introduction. Really great to see you all. Love seeing the number of participants we have joining us today. We definitely wanted to reach out and definitely have this session in order to help local jurisdictions and recycling service providers essentially help understand their obligations under SB 54. And given that there is an exemption process laid out in the statute for local jurisdictions and recycling service providers, we definitely wanted to help provide any information possible to help folks understand how to submit those exemptions and what that process looks like. So next slide, please. As far as an overview goes, we will share a really quick 10-minute guidance video. This will walk us through those statutory obligations and regulatory obligations, as well as the exemption process. We did have LAMD submit that through their listserv yesterday evening. We were trying to get that earlier, but due to some technical logistics with the video, we wanted to still try to share that as soon as possible. So if you haven't watched it already, we're going to watch it here. And if you have watched it already, just hopefully stay tuned and it'll be helpful to watch an additional time. But following the video, we'll provide some additional information and helpful context. So these are things that would have been way too in the weeds to put in this short video. So we are happy to provide some additional information that could be helpful with any future exemption submissions. And then if we have time, I'll happily share some resources and next steps, and then definitely want to leave some time for a Q&A to help address some of those questions that we received early on, plus any that you guys have between now and watching the video. So with that, I'll pause. We can go ahead and get the video started, and then afterwards, we'll get back to the rest of the session. But thank you for now.
Welcome to CalRecycle's video on requirements for local jurisdictions and recycling service providers and the exemption process. The purpose of this video is to help local jurisdictions and recycling service providers understand their obligations under the Plastic Pollution Prevention and Packaging. Welcome to CalRecycle's video on requirements for local jurisdictions and recycling service providers and the exemption process. The purpose of this video is to help local jurisdictions and recycling service providers understand their obligations under the Plastic Pollution Prevention and Packaging Producer Responsibility Act, also known as SB 54. This video will cover the following: statutory and regulatory obligations, including those found in PRC Section 42060.5 and 14 CCR Section 18980.11, 11.1, and 11.2. It will also cover registration with CalRecycle's new Packaging Extended Producer Responsibility System, as well as the exemption process, including how to navigate the system and submit an application or upload a resolution, and finally, resources available and next steps. Well, starting with statutory and regulatory obligations for local jurisdictions and recycling service providers, we recommend reviewing PRC Section 42060.5. The key takeaways from the section include requiring all local jurisdictions and recycling service providers to collect all covered materials deemed recyclable and compostable on the covered material categories list. Also, requiring CalRecycle to establish an exemption process for all materials not practicable to include in collection and recycling programs. We'll cover this in more information on the actual process later on in the video. And finally, it allows a county board of supervisors or rural county or rural jurisdictions, as defined in PRC 42649.8, to adopt a resolution to exempt those entities from the requirements of this section. Next, we recommend reviewing 14 CCR Section 18980.11. The key takeaways include requiring all local jurisdictions and recycling service providers to collect material no later than the date CalRecycle approves the PRO's plan, and any updates to the CMC list do not impact collection obligations until at least 1 year after the update was made. Next, we recommend reviewing 14 CCR Section 18980.11.1. The key takeaways include describing the exemption process for local jurisdictions and recycling service providers, including information on what to include in an exemption application. Also, requiring the exemption to first be submitted to the PRO for up to 90 days for review. This allows coordination between the PRO and the applicant. Following PRO review, exemptions are submitted to CalRecycle for review and approval, and if approved, exemptions are valid for 2 years and can be renewed. Finally, we recommend reviewing 14 CCR Section 18980.11.2. The key takeaways include requiring a rural county or rural jurisdiction that has adopted a resolution to exempt that entity from collection requirements to provide a copy to CalRecycle within 14 days of the adoption date. If those entities do not meet the definition of a rural county or rural jurisdiction, they shall not be exempt from the collection requirements. Now we will move on to discussing the packaging EPR system, also known as PEPRS, where local jurisdictions and recycling service providers can register in the system by following the sign-in process. We'll go ahead and start with the process for recycling service providers. To do so, visit the PEPRS sign-in page. If you have a web pass already with CalRecycle, you can skip this step, but otherwise you will first need to create a web pass. You will be directed to create an account, and once complete, just follow any instructions laid out in the follow-up email and then go back to the PEPRS sign-in page. From here, you can now use your web pass to sign into PEPRS. You will be prompted to select your entity type, in which case you can select Recycling Service Provider. And from there, you can fill out your information, and once you're done, you can hit Submit, and that will be it. You'll have access to your own personal dashboard, and you'll have the option to now submit exemption requests. For local jurisdictions, this process is slightly different. To begin, you'll need to submit a packaging EPR contact request form, which we'll link in the video description below. Fill out the required information and then wait for a follow-up email. This email will provide next steps, including creating a WebPass account, like we discussed previously. So once that step is complete, or you already have a WebPass account, you can now proceed to the Peppers sign-in page. Log in using your WebPass account, and you will be taken to your own personal dashboard where you can now submit exemption requests. If you have questions on these processes, please email peppers, P-E-P-R-S, at calrecycle.ca.gov. Next, we'll move on to the exemption process. We'll show you how to navigate Peppers and either submit an application for an exemption, including how to submit exemptions for multiple entities or covered material categories, and if you're a rural county or rural jurisdiction, how to submit a resolution to CalRecycle. From your dashboard, you'll be able to start filling out an application. This here is our electronic form built right into Peppers. You'll see the different fields asking for specific information, most of which is mandatory as indicated by the asterisks. Add your information into the form as indicated. The form also allows you to add additional contacts in case CalRecycle needs to reach out to different contacts from those submitting the application. We'll go ahead and start with a single exemption application for one jurisdiction. You'll start by adding a new record in this table and filling out each section starting with the local jurisdiction the exemption is for. When you're done, you can click out of the table and move on to the next section. It is important to note right here the question under 1B are relevant if submitting a bulk exemption that includes multiple jurisdictions. We'll cover this in a later example, so for now, we can skip this question and move on to Section 2. Section 2 is where you'll add covered material categories you're seeking an exemption for. One excellent feature is the search tool, where you can search for various codes, and it is based on the most recently published CMC list. It also auto-populates the other relevant information, including recyclability and compostability determinations. Other information that can be added includes specific cover materials relevant to the specific category ID that was selected. The last box is for indicating the specific jurisdiction seeking an exemption from that CMC. Again, this is more relevant to bulk submissions, which we'll highlight more later. When finished, you can click outside of the table, and then you can repeat this step for multiple CMCs now if you want, but in this example, we're going to stick with just this one and move on to providing justifications. You'll see that each entry can be edited to add an appropriate justification. Just click the Edit button and you'll be taken to a page that adds all necessary information. When you're done, you can hit Save. Lastly, you can add which type of documentation you're uploading, which includes any supporting documents relevant to justifying impracticability, and then you'll upload those files and click Submit when you're ready. Once complete, this will automatically go to the PRO's dashboard for review, and any communication you have with CAA can be in or out of Peppers at your preference. Once CAA's review is done, you'll have the option to resubmit your application to CalRecycle with any updated information. Next, we'll show you an example of how a rural county or rural jurisdiction can submit a resolution. Starting back from the beginning of an application, you'll fill out the necessary information as was done in the previous application. The difference here is that you'll select Exemption for Rural Jurisdiction. Once you've added the necessary information, you'll check these boxes to verify that you meet the definition of a rural jurisdiction and that you're submitting a certified copy of the resolution. From there, you can go ahead and upload the file, and when you're done, you can hit Submit. Again, this will be for any rural county or rural jurisdiction seeking an exemption from the law based on adoption of a resolution. Finally, we'll go ahead and show you how a bulk submittal can be completed. Bulk submittals are a convenient way to submit exemptions for multiple jurisdictions. For example, a county seeking an exemption for some or all of their jurisdictions for the same cover material category can submit one exemption on behalf of all of their jurisdictions. To do this, you'll start by filling out the application information and add the jurisdiction seeking the exemption. Once you have included them all, you'll select the boxes in Section 1B indicating you're submitting a bulk submission. The big difference in this application is rather than list each individual CMC in the system in a table like before, you'll have the ability to upload all necessary documents, which can include spreadsheets listing various CMCs by jurisdiction, along with all supporting documents necessary. This is a reminder that multiple jurisdictions may seek the same exemption for a CMC, provided that each jurisdiction in some way demonstrates impracticability for collecting that material. So once you have completed uploading all necessary documents, you can hit submit and your application is complete for all those jurisdictions. The system here was designed to be as convenient as possible for local jurisdictions, so we do recommend communicating as much as possible with all your local partners and see how best to implement this process. We hope you found this video helpful. If you have not already done so, we recommend signing up for our listserv. You can also visit our webpage for more information. And for questions, please email packaging@calrecycle.ca.gov. And lastly, please join us for an interactive webinar on June 17th, 2026, where you can ask questions and speak directly with CalRecycle experts. And if you're watching this video after June 17th, we will have a video of the recorded webinar linked here in the video description as soon as it becomes available.
All right. Thank you, and thanks for getting that set up for us. Hopefully that was helpful. I know it was a lot to get through in a small amount of time, so obviously if you have any more specific questions, we're happy to address those at the Q&A. But as I said before, without having to get too in the weeds on that video, there is some additional information and helpful context that I think would be great for us to share at this time. So next slide, please. So this slide just depicts some of the requirements that are helpful to reference for folks. So again, with 11.1, it does require local jurisdictions and recycling service providers to submit the application first to the PRO. And that is for a 90-day review period. But one thing we do want to note that if both parties agree that that 90-day review period can be extended, so if there is more time needed in those discussions between the PRO and local jurisdictions, that's totally open, provided those parties have just mutual concurrence on that. Also, just noting that local jurisdictions, recycling service providers, they'll need to include any written comments, if any, from the PRO or any independent producers. And then any objections to exemptions by the PRO will just hold them responsible for any alternative collection for those materials. So there's just some additional information we wanted to keep in mind. And next slide, please. And I know throughout that video, we did hear the word impracticability. So just to make some extra information, the statute does allow any jurisdictions for anything that's not practicable to include in collection. That's where the exemption process comes into play. So when we say impracticability, so I know some of these were in questions that we heard before as well. But what information that we're looking for specifically includes anything like local conditions or circumstances or challenges that do make it impracticable for that collection to happen. One of the pieces there as well is obviously if there's no end market available, that would be a local condition. So this is definitely some information I recommend reviewing as you're thinking about what circumstances might cause this impracticability to happen in your situation. So hopefully this provides us some additional context for you to look at when you're filling out those applications. Next slide, please. So in this, just some helpful information. So we were in the testing phase when we were still developing that video. So we are still working on getting the program ready for launch for those exemption applications. But just noting that each person who signs into the system will have their own dashboard to submit those applications. And we are providing a lot of helpful information that's available when they're in that system. So you will be able to submit exemptions directly to the PRO through that system. And then as the video said as well, when it's ready to come to CalRecycle, that information can be plugged in and submitted directly to us as well, all through that same process. And then we do include helpful links. So as we mentioned before, the packaging EPR contact is definitely really important because that does allow someone who is a local jurisdiction to be included in the system. So I know you're already included in other CalRecycle systems, but this one just does give you access to Peppers, which is specific to SB 54. You also need to create a WebPass account. So that's another thing that is important. So if you don't have one already, you'll definitely need to create a WebPass account to get that access. And then we do have a link directly that goes right to Peppers, which we will be publishing a new webpage pretty soon that we can share. where all of this will be helpful and available to folks to see in one location. So you're not searching on for various links. But next slide, please. So just some extra information on the actual exemption request. So for an exemption request that's submitted by a local jurisdiction or recycling service provider, they will be forwarded to any contacts of the PRO or independent producers. And then notification emails will be sent to any local jurisdiction representatives regarding the status of that request. And then there will be a notification email sent to all parties for that 90-day review period. And then any extensions to that review period that's agreed upon later. And the slide does reference a 30-day renewal period. And the one thing I just wanted to point out here is that since these exemption applications are valid for 2 years after approval, when it comes to renewals of those already approved applications, that process is actually shortened based on the regulatory requirements. So recommend reviewing the regulations for more information, but just wanted to highlight that here for some additional context. Next slide, please. All right. So as I mentioned before, communication can happen in the portal if you choose to. Otherwise, any communication with CAA can definitely happen outside of the portal, just depending on how you guys want to work together on this process. And then any documentation of the final comments received from the PRO, they will be recorded in Peppers. And then any notification of next steps will be sent to the applicant when the review timeline ends. So as you're going through the system and this process, you will be notified accordingly. So definitely keep an eye out for any emails necessary in the system just for any of that ongoing process. Next slide. So once the previous steps are completed, Peppers will assist local jurisdictions and recycling service providers to edit the original request reviewed by the PRO. They can submit them to CalRecycle, and then CalRecycle at this point during our review, we can request additional information if necessary. We can notify all interested parties about the status of their application, and we can provide a list of approved exemptions on our public website, which we will have. As I mentioned, that website they are publishing that will be available and will house any approvals that we have for these local jurisdiction and recycling service provider exemptions. Next slide, please. So this is just highlighting our packaging EPR contact form. So again, this is definitely going to be really important for any folks to fill out. So what this does is you'll submit the request form, and then this allows to submit an exemption request. You can get any application notification and updates for those applications submitted by local jurisdictions. They could also be submitted to recycling service provider. And then we will review and the submitted application to the PRO. So next slide. And then one thing to note, we didn't mention this in the video. It sort of showed up much quicker in the video itself. But just letting you know that when you do submit the EPR packaging form, this isn't an immediate response that you'll get like any auto emails when you sign up for any kind of subscription. So it's not going to be right away. We do have a staff person that does review these as they come in just to make sure the information is accurate. But that email will get approved and then that notification will be emailed sometime after that submittal. But just highlighting that it's not going to be immediate. So if you're concerned that you haven't received it right away, it's probably the fact that our staff would still be reviewing. So definitely wanted to share that extra information as available. All right, next slide. So just some additional information. So requirements for recycling service providers. They must notify each local jurisdiction in which it provides services that would affect the extension or exemption. So that does include contact information as well as a description of each local jurisdiction involvement in the application process. So this actually should address that question that we had from HF&H regarding who submits the exemption application, whether it's a jurisdiction or a recycling service provider. And right now that process itself is flexible. So that would involve just coordination on your guys' part. But if a recycling service provider is the one to submit the application, then there are some extra steps such as this that do have to be met, which is including that extra local jurisdiction information. So just wanted to have you guys keep that in mind, depending on who ends up submitting those exemption applications. Next slide, please. So this is what that would look like essentially in the system. So the packaging EPR contact, you would basically be filling out these additional boxes with that information. So this is what would be required on the RSPs portal when they would submit an exemption application. So this is maybe one difference that you will notice between a local jurisdiction and a recycling service provider to each of their respective dashboards. Next slide. The other thing I wanted to point out, so the video did mention with bulk submissions, it is a lot more different than just filling out that table with each individual cover material category. So with bulk submissions, it essentially just allows the attachment of any files that are relevant that could be available for us to review. So this does leave flexibility to local jurisdictions and recycling service providers. And what I mean by bulk submissions is that essentially one jurisdiction, so if it's a county, for example, they could submit one application on behalf of all of their jurisdictions as part of that county if that was something they wanted. So any of that bulk submittal could be whether it's a spreadsheet that identifies the various jurisdictions or the various cover material categories. Like it does kind of leave it up to you for how you want to format it. As long as that information is available for us to review, like we would just need to see obviously the contact information, the local jurisdiction information, the various cover materials, and then also those justifications. So what's needed to demonstrate that impracticability for each of those jurisdictions that are seeking the exemption. So that's just something to keep in mind with bulk submittals is that there is flexibility with how this can be formatted. But if you have any questions or need any information for maybe how you'd want to submit, you could always reach out to us at packaging@calrecycle.ca.gov. We'd be happy to kind of discuss this further if you guys have any questions. But next slide, please. All right, so this will be a little bit of a repeat for what you guys heard at the last part of the video, but just going ahead to the next slide. As I said before, signing up for our listserv does keep you up to date on all things SB 54. So when we update the new webpage, when we launch the portal available for local jurisdiction submissions, that'll definitely come through our listserv. So keep an eye out for that messaging. You can also visit our SB 54 webpage for more information. Our main 54 page will link to all of our various child pages. So that will link to any of our newly published pages, which we'll mention. So you can always visit that for more information. As I said before, emailing packaging@calrecycle.ca.gov is the best way for us to answer any inquiries from folks. We do have a dedicated team that can address any questions, and we will try to respond to those as quickly as we can. And then, as I said, this guidance video is now available on our CalRecycle YouTube channel. So feel free to watch that as much as you need to. And then, as always, email us with any questions that you might have if you guys start getting run into any issues while you're navigating the system. We definitely want to be there to help. But with that, I believe we can go ahead and move on to Q&A. But yeah, I really appreciate your time in the meantime and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Marcus. And yeah, we have a few questions here that'll definitely take us to the end of the webinar. So I'll try to get through them as quickly as possible so that we don't have to leave any off. First question here is the September 2nd, 2025 covered material category reporting guidance document includes a lot of helpful information, including examples for each CMC. However, a few questions have come up. Does a jurisdiction collect a CMC if they do not collect all examples listed in the guidance document for that CMC? The examples provided here include other mixed paper with plastic, which includes examples of wax paper bags and liners, glassine envelopes, meat absorbent pads, and butter wrappers. Most jurisdictions accept waxed paper bags, liners, and envelopes, but do not accept meat absorbent pads and butter wrappers. Should jurisdictions request an exemption for the whole category if not all example materials are collected?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. So yeah, we definitely wanted to highlight that essentially all cover materials identified in a particular CMC should be collected, provided that CMC does not already have an approved exemption. So the application does allow local jurisdictions or RSPs to enter specific cover material. So in that scenario, obviously meat absorbent pads or butter wrappers. So you can include a specific CMC or an entire category. So it is up to those jurisdictions or recycling service providers with how they want to essentially implement that requirement. So with either request, they'll be required to demonstrate why including any of that cover material category and their collection systems impracticable. So any of those local conditions, et cetera, would just have to apply on that specific basis. So when requesting an exemption, yeah, as I said, those are just the things you want to highlight, whether it's like any safety issues, any like other local conditions, et cetera, would be what you would include in that justification. But thanks, Zach. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Marcus. Next one for your team is, how should we reconcile differences between CMCs versus public education materials, which tend to be more item-based? The example provided being molded fiber, all forms without plastic. If a jurisdiction accepts paper egg cartons, which is a type of molded fiber, does that count for compliance for the full molded fiber CMC? Another example shared here was other forms of steel, which the CMC guide notes that this includes large metal lids. If the jurisdiction accepts metal lids in recycling, but don't necessarily call out all other forms of steel in public education materials, is this compliant, or should the jurisdiction request an exemption?
Yeah, thanks, Zach. So there's a few points I can cover. So as I mentioned in the last response, jurisdictions must collect all of those cover materials in the cover material category list that are recyclable or compostable. So in light of that, the exemption application does allow those entities to enter specific cover material included in a specific CMC or the entire category. So it is up, as I mentioned before, it is up to them for how to do that request as appropriate. And then to receive an exemption, the reasons for not collecting do need to include those local conditions or demonstration for impracticability. And then additionally, any jurisdiction education materials do not have to list every covered materials. So for CalRecycle's public education materials, that's only one source of information that can be used for compliance. So CalRecycle will verify that those entities do include all cover materials in the CMC list. So we will determine compliance by looking at available data such as 1383 local implementation records, field observations, the year, and we will evaluate that evidence to support compliance with any determinations that we've been met. So yeah, appreciate that question.
Thanks. All right, our next one here is a little bit simpler. Do covered material categories deemed recyclable and compostable have to be collected in both streams or just one?
Yeah, so I think this is where a lot of the discussions around how 54 intersects with 1383. So with respect to SB 54, our statute doesn't really get into specifics for how a local jurisdiction or recycling service provider is supposed to collect the material. So there's nothing like collection requirements like there are in 1383. All SB 54 requires is that anything deemed compostable or recyclable is collected. So it is up to the jurisdictions for how to implement that requirement. So obviously there is that consideration that has to be taken in to consideration for any of the collection systems that are already in place by that jurisdiction. But SB 54 doesn't get that granular. So it does leave it up to the jurisdictions for how you guys want to implement that collection.
Thanks, Marcus. All right. I believe this will be, that was our last question of the day. We're at time here and we want to leave some time for closing remarks. So thank you, Marcus and Pin, for helping respond to these questions. We really appreciate your help. And I'm going to go ahead and pass things on so we can wrap up for the day.
Thank you, Zach. I want to extend a huge thank you to all of today's presenters. This concludes today's SB 1383 and SB 54 Chat with CalRecycle. We are incredibly grateful to all our presenters for sharing their insights and to all of our attendees for taking the time to join us. Your engagement is what makes these video chats so valuable, and we appreciate your participation. Before we end, I want to share that a recording of this webinar will be posted on CalRecycle's YouTube channel in about a week. Now I'll turn it over to the Local Assistance and Market Development Branch Chief Marshall for the closing remarks.
Ooh, fantastic. And thank you, Addie. Wow, we covered so much information and next steps, including the overview and clarification of roles and responsibilities, related requirements, and assistance resources. I think you heard that a strong commitment from the department to streamline implementation and provide compliance assistance for jurisdictions and continued collaboration with the CAA team. We talked about what jurisdictions can start doing now in terms of reviewing the collected materials compared to covered materials category list, tracking costs, and participating in the CAA survey, as well as providing feedback for the public consultation regarding the program plan and responsible end market standard. For those of you that submitted questions that were not addressed, Please send your questions to the email address on the screen, and that way we can be sure to respond. And then I wanted to share a little bit of information about the next chat with CalRecycle that you can look forward to. That will be on the topic of CalRecycle's enforcement on jurisdictions related to SB 1383. And that will be held on July 22nd from 1 to 3 p.m. And with that, I also thank you all for participating and making this engagement opportunity possible.